card for a parking problem.
Four in your 23.
Yes, that's 4, I'll get a 28 truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Line truck, White Lincoln X-ray 985, should come back up heading.
So you had 2000. Patrick Spalding.
10-4, if you can just put a little note in something like that, I'm going to be leaving a note on his vehicle if I can remove it.
Rockingham 505. 505 and shipping Dillison case for Athens, complainant, soon to be ex, slasher tires, and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Forgive this at 32.
10-4. 532, you're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
10-4. No, 3 in Depot Street. Truck boy entry 5.
7435.
10-4.
10-4.
Can you go 643 again?
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but that just looks like we do.
10-4, I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that town property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449 1120.
Now 449 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Rockville 535.
You have a great college.
535.
You got me. You guys know if our woman who walked into my house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He's now pounding on the door, trying to get it out. About 5 people at work are here. Got tie-dye shirt on. And number 21 is on.
We have separation. Inboard now. Excuse me. Hey guys, good evening. Hope you're enjoying the great fall weather. Of course, I hope you're not in harm's way down in Florida tonight. If you are, hope everything goes well. Sit tight, and hopefully you're not in any danger. So, going to have a special guest on in a moment, and she is backstage and ready. So it's going to be fun. Just want to mention the book contract was finalized today, so that will be out in January. And the approach on the book is to try to be fair to both sides. I think you all know where I currently stand on the evidence, but it's not because of any kind of bias. And if any new evidence emerges before I'm done, we'll factor it all in. So before I bring on the guest, just one other thing. I want to challenge all of us, but especially any of us that participate in the social media aspect of this case. Consider where you might be 2 years from now, looking back at how you conducted yourself in this case. And just challenge yourself to try to decide how things might look 2 years from now and whether you acted in a way that you feel proud. Now, look, hindsight is 2020. So there are already, as someone who's been covering this myself for over a year and a half, yeah, there are things that I would absolutely do different. So there's nothing wrong with that. But maybe if I was able to do that a year and a half ago and look forward and say, wow, how's this going to look a year and a half from now? Maybe I would have done a better job at doing some of those things a little different in the first place. So there's a lot going on here that's more than just how we feel about the case or how we interpret the evidence of the case. There are huge issues going on that make this case unique in how we conduct ourselves. And so 2 years from now, will you be able to say that you sought the truth, that you truly, truly sought the truth, meaning asking questions from all sides and tried to get to the truth? Were you fair? Those are the questions we all have to ask ourselves. Were we fair to everybody involved, from Karen to the witnesses that are being accused of being part of a conspiracy? Did you allow bias to maybe impact your judgment? Bias maybe from other things in your life, other cases, or just not other cases, but just things personally in your life. So, for instance, maybe you have a certain opinion of law enforcement based on your own life's experience. And have you allowed that to unfairly get in the way here? Those are all things you have to look at. Have those things influenced your judgment? And then lastly on that, 2 years from now, how will you feel about staying quiet when a mob and its leader threatened to go after the kids of the Attorney General at their soccer game? How will you feel if you stayed silent in that moment? So I want people to think about that. Before I bring Dana on, I actually want to do something that I hope she's okay with, and I think she will be. I'm just going to read the email that she sent to me. And I never see, one of the things that's very unfortunate in this case is that people are always sharing private messages. It seems to be just kind of a one-sided thing. It really seems to be from the other side. But they're always leaking your private texts that you have with them and emails, and even worse, a lot of times taking things out of context. So I would never do that. And I don't think Dana would consider that here, because this email is just so well done. It really speaks very well of her. And I think it's it creates the right kind of tone that we ideally should aspire to in this case. So she says, Kevin, this is my first message from her. She says, Kevin, I appreciate your openness to hearing both sides. I recently watched your show earlier this week and would much rather discuss ideas with you in a thoughtful conversation rather than on Twitter. I'll add, I was on the other side to having you on the Glarer, but it doesn't look like that will happen. So meaning when I had challenged the Glarer to have me on to discuss this case, and he refused, but he put it out to his audience. What do you guys think? Take a poll. But listen, the vast majority of his audience knows how that would go. So they voted no. But she was different. She was on the side of, hey, let's have a discussion. And so she goes on, this is me trying to learn about the other side, your side, as you mentioned in your recent video. Where I get frustrated when talking about this case is that nobody makes it clear in the guilty camp if they really would actually vote guilty beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty if they were a juror. Now, I don't know why she's adding moral certainty because that's not part of the jury's instructions, but that's okay. We get the point. I just can't get to that place. Saying she did it and convicting for a possible life sentence is completely different. One is legal, one is a topic of conversation. And then she listed a whole bunch of points that we could go into that were the basis for reasonable doubt, at least in many people's minds, right? Unless you can explain them. And I think I can explain many of them. I know for a fact that I can explain many of them to a very full, in a very satisfactory way. Now, maybe there are some other ones where I can explain them, but the answer might not satisfy everybody. And then there are still a few that I can't explain at all, or I really can't explain very well. She says, I just don't understand how when you look at this case in its entirety, you don't have one reasonable doubt that she might be innocent and that it could be possible that there is more than just one corrupt officer in the Canton police officer. And all it takes is a few bad apples and a situation gone wrong. In other words, Sandra Birchmore. And I will say, just before I bring on Dana, the only bad apple that we know of in Sandra Birchmore is the killer, Farwell. Hold on one second. So there were other bad apples in the sense of people that groomed those underage girls and sexually abused them. And that has to be rooted out. But in terms of police misconduct, in terms of the state police investigation, to this point, there is no evidence of any kind of a cover-up. Matthew Farwell had tried to, he planned, according to the federal document, he planned this weeks ahead of time and took steps to try to cover his tracks, including delete his messages. He was worried that they might not be able to completely delete them, but I think he was successful in deleting them. However, the feds were able to do what the state really cannot. This is the kind of thing that states can't do, was to get into the messages stored in the iCloud. So these are messages between two Apple phones, and they're stored in the cloud. So there was no way to delete them. And the feds were able to get that information. And that's the basis of the charges now. So we don't know. For all we know, the state asked the feds to do that. We just don't know at this point. There's no evidence of corruption by Trooper Garino, who did the phone extraction in both these cases. So that's just important to think about. All right, so let me bring on, very excited to have Dana. I'm not going to say her last name in case she doesn't want it said. Hold on one second. Hi, Dana. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes. Excellent. Dana, you sound very nice and clear to me. So people in chat, give me a little bit of feedback if I need to turn my mic up or down. But so to me, it sounds good. So hi, Dana. Welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
I hope I did justice to your excellent introductory email to me. I very much appreciated it. And I hope, I think ideally you set the tone for how discussions should be on this case.
Yes, most definitely. Nobody has discussions, especially in a platform, hopefully as normal as there is structured like this. When you're on social media, it's not structured. It gets wild and crazy, and you just get blocked, or nobody answers the real question. So having a conversation that actually has both sides be able to ask and answer and really think about how you got to your idea versus how I'm at where I'm at is just how to debate.
Right. So how did you first get interested in this case, Dana?
I actually was watching an episode of Surviving the Survivor,
Hmm.
and I actually caught the one where Turtle Boy and Wendy Murphy were going at it, and
Oh, that was a while ago. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
I mean
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was before the trial, but actually I don't even know when it originally aired or if I caught it when it was airing. It was probably a good month or two or so before the case. I don't
It
know if
was
that.
more, I think it was actually from the summer of 2023. It was pretty far
Okay.
back.
See,
Yeah.
I watched that somehow in spring.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
well, I guess before spring if the trial started in March. So January, February-ish.
Yeah.
But anyways, that conversation was so heated and I was just like, "Whoa, what in the world is so fiery?" And I just had to learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
So after I listened to that whole episode, the first thing I Googled was the injury photos and the autopsy photos.
Hmm.
And that's where the doubt originated in my mind, and that's where the doubt
Hmm.
still originates in my mind. Like, I
Hmm.
cannot, to this day, get over the fact that those injuries were caused by a motor vehicle pedestrian collision. I can't absorb it, and I can't get around it, and that's where I feel like you start the divide. If you
Hmm.
think that those injuries are possible from a vehicle, then you can easily fall in the guilty camp. If your
Right.
mind looks at that and says, "No way," or "I don't understand," or it's just even confused, you can fall into the not guilty camp just by those photos.
Hmm.
So once you start learning about the autopsy and the injuries, which they didn't even talk about into in the trial until what, like week 4, which was so
Yeah. It,
frustrating.
it felt like week 13,
It was
but
it was it was it was ridiculous, like,
yeah.
I felt like if the jury knew what he looked like, they could have a picture in their mind to, like,
Hmm.
camp out through the whole trial, and that just didn't happen. Whereas in
Yeah.
the opposite, that was the very, very first thing that I went to was, "Well, what were this guy's injuries?" So when I saw the injuries, immediately I was like, "That's not a car." So
Yeah.
that's just where my mind fell to begin with. And then when you hear the other things, it just stacks up quickly.
Hmm.
So that's where I began, was just that episode of STS, and then obviously you can't get around, like, watching and seeing what Turtle Boy has to say, and I don't really know, none of the people I like to follow were covering the case because it
Hmm.
wasn't in trial. Like, I like to, like, I try to be more law-minded instead of sleuthy or true crimey. Like, I kinda
Hmm.
like more like legal aspect, and that's where you can kinda
Hmm.
circle back around to my question is, like, we can have this conversation, and I'd like to ask you and well, I'm not watching the chat, I just can't do 2 things at once. But, like, would you as a juror really, really convict beyond a reasonable doubt that she did this? And by the way, it does say in the Massachusetts, uh, you know, the jargon in the jury
Oh, it
instructions.
does say moral certainty. Okay.
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hidden, it's within her speech, but it's there.
Okay.
I mean, would you really convict this lady beyond a reasonable doubt if she's going to prison for the rest of her life? That's just not it's it I don't think you're being honest with yourself if you say yes, and then I can pause that and say, "Okay, now let's get down and be like, now let's talk dirty. Let's figure out, like, what do you think really happened and what's your, scenario? Like, what do you think this, and
Hmm.
this means?" But I mean, just the basic question when a person's on trial for and going to jail for the rest of their life, do you think that you would put them behind bars and convict beyond a reasonable doubt? I just don't think that's fair in this case.
Okay. Can I respond?
Yeah.
All right. So I think your points are great, and they represent it to some degree where someone like I was when this story first became on the public horizon, which was on April 18th of 2023, when Turtle Boy published the defense conspiracy theory. And the way, as you know, the way it works, the prosecution's not going to conduct their case in the media. So what we were getting was from the defense side, and slowly over the course of a year, a little bit more comes out through documents. For instance, in September of 2023, in a state document, we learned that John's phone never went inside the house. Um, period. It just didn't. And we can go into that later, but we don't. If you're not troubled by that, we can just accept it too. But I agree with your point essentially that the state has to prove that they understand how those injuries were caused. And so early on for me, being a civilian, not being a police officer, right? Never been in law enforcement. I talked to other people in law enforcement. None of them were accident reconstructionists, but many of them had worked as root cops for years. And that unfortunately, part of the job is coming across accident scenes. And all of them said that it was amazing to them how inexplicable accident injuries often are. Not just pedestrian accidents, but any kind of injury involving whether it's a hit and run or something where the people are still inside the car, and how much of a variety is. And what they all said was, but the experts will understand it and they'll be able to explain it. Now, what disappointed us in this trial, or at least many of us, is that it did not feel like the experts gave a very convincing explanation of that. So when you're talking about reasonable doubt, I can see where someone on that jury had reasonable doubt. Now I had an advantage that the jury didn't, and that I've been studying this case for a year. And so as things come out in that incredibly long trial, I was able to document those specific pieces of evidence, the kind of things that couldn't be fudged. And so I feel myself that way beyond a reasonable doubt, Karen did this. But I'm not at all surprised that somebody sitting in that jury box would not have that same understanding of it at all. So the state needs to do a much better job, and I believe they will. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes. Well, yeah, you definitely have the advantage of the history and as the case unfolded, but also like when you look at how the case unfolded from day one, they didn't even interview half the people involved for months and months and months. So it doesn't surprise me that different information trickled out. Like they didn't interview anybody. They interviewed who they thought was important when they deemed necessary to check a couple boxes. But once the defense had a defense, they just failed in the initial investigation. They didn't interview everybody. They didn't interview the Lucky Loughran guy for 18 months. So if you doubt his testimony, well, maybe it's not the testimony to doubt, but it's the fact that he was recollecting a night from 18 months ago. So saying it like that, I don't think is completely fair because none of the interviews were recorded. There was no body cams. There was no interviews. There was really crappy reporting by the police after each interview they did. Nothing was recorded, which just that leaves room for concern. It definitely leaves room for concern.
So let me touch on the lucky part first. I think that's a blunder. So we were told, according to Trooper Proctor, that when he interviewed the DPW guy, Trotta, I think Michael Trotta was his name, that he told him that no one had plowed the street yet at that time. And the troopers didn't go to the crime scene that day. And the 2.5 feet of snow had fallen, but most of it fell during the day.
But couldn't they have seen by the morning of that, yes, that road was plowed at some point? Wouldn't it have been obvious that it wasn't
only if they had gone there at 6 or 7 o'clock, early in the morning. So if you go back and you look at the dash cam video,
that's when the accident occurred. They were there at 6 a.m. They would have known.
I'm sorry, but there's the state police that ran the investigation, and then there's the first responders that are different, and they were there early on. So it's the state police that conducted the investigation, and they were not at the crime scene that day. So they were apparently under the false impression that it was not plowed.
And that goes to another point. There was no photos, horrible photos. Any photo they took of any of the evidence gave no perspective of where anything was. So there was no pullback photo of the scene. There was no pullback photo of the road, of the perspective. Like it's just poor investigation. And it started at 7 a.m.
Yeah. Let me go back to the witness's comment though. Outside of Lucky Loughran, I think you should be able to understand that there was most of these people that, in hindsight and looking at this as trying to investigate a possible conspiracy theory or that he was murdered in the house, which they had no reason to think that back then. And so interviewing people like, say, Colin Albert, there'd be no reason to. They just really needed to interview a few people to get it. Once they learned that John never went in the house, there was no reason to really interview anybody in the house. It wouldn't have been a high priority. I think you can understand that. It's only with this kind of modern look, like, wow, shouldn't they have investigated whether he went in the house? But everybody agreed that he did not go in the house. And pretty quickly, they got the GPS that showed that he didn't go in the house. And Karen was her vehicle was damaged. At the crime scene, she was making odd statements that sounded like, I don't want to say a confession, but that she seemed to know she had some kind of involvement in it. And then apparently even her behavior at the house when the troopers got there was a little bit suspicious and odd. So I just don't think that they had any reason to investigate some big, wild, crazy murder conspiracy where someone's going to leave someone on their own lawn, still alive, where they could be revived and tell the story of their attack.
And I agree with the fact that that's why people think that this is a giant conspiracy. I don't think it took that many people, because it, at your face value and the face value of many, you're right. But that's why I feel like it didn't take that many people for people to adapt the mindset of, this is crazy, guys, or even admit that we did a poor job. We should have done a lot of things differently, but then it's too late. So, I mean, I want to pause this and I want to ask you something, just because it was on my thought process. But you said at one point you were on the opposite side. What specific things made you flip?
Sure. Oh, that's a great question. So for me, I was all from the very beginning, even when I was on the other side, asking logic questions like, does it make sense to leave somebody on your own lawn? I mean, at least if you're going to try to make it staged as a hit and run, why wouldn't you put it on the street? But he's found several feet onto the lawn. That's not how you would do it, right? Why would they actually put the drinking straw out there? If he came in the house and the glass broke inside, they actually went through the effort of putting the drinking straw out in the gutter too. That seems strange to me. The number of people that had to be involved in this, when you really look at this closely, Dana, it really is, it requires a lot of people to stay silent in this, people that have no incentive to it. We can come back to that later. But for me, if 227, if she really had made that search, Jen McCabe, I'm talking about, at 227 for how long to die in the cold, well then, all right, there's obviously a conspiracy. But then it was probably in a hearing in June where the state revealed that they have an independent expert that said that didn't happen, that the search, even the defense had admitted there was 3 searches typed in. They were all a different variation of how long to die in the cold. And the more logical thing was that all 3 of those came at the same time. Just as Jen McCabe explained, it was when they were cold and at the scene, and Jen was asking her that, and she was struggling to type that into her phone. And we now know that they had an expert. Now, I didn't conclude from that right away that 227 was false, but I was like, all right, now we have competing experts here. And at best, it's a 50-50 thing, right? So we don't know. And you got to keep digging into other evidence. And so what really started to flip me, though, was when I started trying to learn where Karen's SUV was all day and who had access to it and what time were the pieces found. And what I came up with was that it had nothing to do. It's always possible that a trooper or a cop is going to be corrupt, has some unknown motive to be willing to risk his entire career and his freedom to plant evidence, right? You don't eliminate that as a possibility, even though that's pretty rare. But there just was no opportunity to get at any of those taillight pieces. So the car, Karen had it in the garage, and then she went out looking for John, went to the Jen McCabe's, came back, and then Karen, and Jen went out looking for John. At that point, Karen's Lexus is in the driveway under Ring surveillance. And there's activity going on in and around the house. There's someone comes to pick up the niece from inside, and he spends some time outside shoveling. And then at 8:22, a cop comes in to do a wellness check. and then the O'Keefe family gets back around 10 o'clock. And so it just was hard to imagine it could have been tampered at any time before 10 o'clock. Then the O'Keefe family is in the house, and a couple hours later or an hour later, Karen and her dad and her brother and his wife arrive. And they're there about a half hour. Then they take the car and drive it to Dighton. Now, this is the middle of a blizzard. Now, it's parked in the driveway in Dighton, getting buried by snow. The streets are practically impassable. And again, that's also under ring surveillance. It leaves Dighton on a tow truck after the state troopers get there around 4 or something like that, maybe 3:30. And for them to have tampered with it there, they were with a Dighton cop. It was under ring surveillance. And it's been documented many times now that the taillight was already missing the pieces by then anyways. But then they tow it to the Sally Port, which is in Canton and is a mile from the prosecutor's office. And that's the main reason it was really towed there, plus that it was a heated garage. And they arrive there. They get inside at 5:36. The garage door doesn't close until 5:42. At that time, the CERT team is already digging. It's shoveling in an area that's the size of 2 parking spaces, a 7-man team of specialists. And there's other state troopers there, including their commander. There's a news truck there filming it. That is not the environment in which Trooper Proctor could race over there somehow, which he didn't have time to anyways, and bury those pieces 3 feet down. They were found 3 feet down at street level under a 3-foot embankment. So it's just the possibility of planting evidence was next to impossible and really unlikely. So let's say even if Trooper Proctor had a way to plant evidence at, say, 5 o'clock somehow, right?
What if I say I don't think it's Trooper Proctor that planted evidence?
Well, here's the thing. Somebody had to plant evidence or Karen did it. There's no middle ground.
I didn't go back and rewatch a lot, but there were some things that I did go back and rewatch. I rewatched the CERT guy who had the CERT team that found the taillight.
Yeah.
He had 7 members of his team, and he said there were 5 Canton police officers there, and he only recognized 2 of them. So you have 3 people that he had no idea that were there. And then to back up a minute, your whole day of what happened with the car is great, but why isn't there any real good footage? Every picture is crap of that taillight. It is garbage. You can debate it. You can look at it. You can zoom in. You can't tell for certainty if that taillight is there or not. One of the points that I mentioned in my list was Officer Barros. And I actually, this is one of the things I can send you, the testimony that he has that specifically states that taillight was not completely damaged. And I think that would be really, really good if I could send that to you and we could watch his testimony. And then how do you compare the picture that we all have in our minds with that taillight completely dismembered with what this testestimony is? And
I disagree strongly with this, Dana.
Okay, let's do it.
So, and there's a lot of reasons to it too. But you talking about the trooper from Dighton and understand what he's walking into. Okay, he has
no dog in this fight. He has one memory. It's of
agreed. Now let me explain though. Okay, if you look at where that taillight, the majority of the damage is done really on the side. It's around the corner and on the side. It's the corner part of it that's knocked off. Okay, it's that part of the outer shell that is missing creates a housing inside that during a blizzard got filled with snow. Okay. And
you're assuming this though. You are making
no. That's just no. I'm not assuming anything. I'm assuming it, but it's common sense. Just like if I'm not wearing an umbrella and rain falls on my head, it's going to get wet. If it snows into a cup, it's going to fill with snow. I live in New England, and so you have an open taillight there in a blizzard that has dropped over 2 feet of snow. That's going to fill with snow. In addition to that, it's a sticky snow that's kind of covering it, and they're not going to touch that taillight, and it's not the job of that Dighton cop to go investigate it. They're trudging through a difficult driveway. He's just going to glance at it from a distance. But what he described was that it was partially intact and then missing pieces. And that's exactly what it was. If you look at
that
that
tail
picture,
light
that
was gone. There was
no,
it was obliterated.
it's not
Picture
at all.
from the
All
Sally
right,
port
I'm gonna,
had nothing.
it's
Well, let's do that.
you're looking at it from the side angle. If you look at that taillight from the back, it looks largely intact. It's only the side that is missing those pieces. I'll see if I can find you a picture.
Yeah, you put a picture of what they displayed in the Sally port is what the taillight looked like as per the best picture of evidence we even have of that taillight. There is not one photo on any drive. There was no canvassing. There was nothing done to get any decent photo of that taillight. And then he didn't even take a picture of it at the house.
That's just not how they work. They don't walk around with cameras taking pictures of these things. They have the crime scene to do that stuff.
Well,
but it's just
it's a crime scene. If you're going to confiscate her vehicle, I mean, that is, you have to admit that this whole controversy is over that taillight. It really is. If those taillight pieces weren't there,
yeah, and that's exactly where I determined there was no conspiracy.
Well, and
because if you look closely at the video, now I agree with you, it's not clear because it's Ring video and it's night vision, but you can see that it's missing those pieces at 5:08. You can see that it's missing pieces at 8:22 when you get the dash cam video of the cops that came and did the wellness check. In addition, Kerry Roberts, who is not connected to the conspirators, but is practically a member of the O'Keefe family, who went and picked up the O'Keefe parents that morning and brought them to the hospital. When she was shown the picture of the taillight, the condition it was at the Sally port, she showed that in court, and she said, "That's exactly what I saw."
I don't believe that's what she said in testimony.
That's what she said.
She was not shown the picture. She did not confirm the picture.
She was shown the picture in court.
No, she wasn't.
Of course,
I don't believe she was. If she was, I will stand corrected. I don't believe she was. She was asked to describe it. And
I remember them bringing it up, and I'm not going to go back and play it again. I'm sorry, Dana, because it will be too hard to find it. But I specifically remember Adam Lally brought the picture up. First, he had her describe it, and then he brought the picture up on the screen, and she said, "Is this what you saw?" And she said, "Yes." She even had described this kind of a little plastic prong coming out, and that's part of the support structure. Yes, and then she basically said, "Yeah, that's what I saw." In addition to that, I'll give you something else that didn't come out in the trial, Dana, but is in the discovery evidence, and it may come out the next time. So, Boston Magazine reporter Gretchen Voss did an interview with Karen Reed, and 8-hour interview with her lawyer present, David Yannetti. And in that interview, Karen Reed described, and this is 2023 in that summer. She described how badly damaged the taillight was, that it was missing pieces, that she said wires were exposed. It wasn't really wires, but that was what she thought. But here's the thing. She said, "I actually plucked out a piece and dropped it in the driveway." Now, why did she tell this story? The reason is because she didn't understand what you're thinking now, and what we started thinking after this was that you need to show that the taillight was just cracked. She didn't understand that then, and neither did her lawyer, David Yannetti. So what she was trying to show was that the state police lied when they said they found no pieces in the driveway. And this is why in the trial, David,
the driveway of her house?
No, the driveway of One Meadows, John's driveway.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry. Yes, that's what I meant.
Yes. And this is why in the trial, Adam Lally made a point of it didn't come out into play, but I understood why he was doing it. He made a point of showing how Paul O'Keefe, and I think maybe with the help of someone else, first they shoveled that driveway and then they snowblowed it so it was perfectly clear. And what he was trying to do was in case they decided to use that testimony, and the defense tried to say, "Well, why didn't you find that piece?" He was going to say, "Hey, this is why, because it was thoroughly cleaned." And so it's not surprising that missing taillight piece ended up in the yard somewhere and the state troopers didn't find it. But Karen Reed herself didn't understand what you're saying now, that if you show the taillight was intact, but just cracked, that there's a conspiracy. So she released that. And here's another thing too, Dana. When she released that video, she gave it to Court TV. And you can go look up this clip right now, because if you search taillight video or driveway video, it comes up near the top. And I've watched it many times and I've played it on my show. And in that video, the court reporter, this is the first time we all saw that Ring video, the court reporter said that Karen Reed's defense told them that in that video, The taillight is missing pieces, clearly missing pieces. You can go watch this video. If I have time, I'll pull it up for you, but anybody can watch it.
Well,
So
I
the reason,
do. Yeah, I
but
mean, I would like to. I don't know anything about the Gretchen Voss interview. Again, I didn't follow this case that far back, but why wouldn't that testimony be admitted in trial? Like, why wouldn't she, you know, why wouldn't that be used against her in trial? Your words can be used against her. I don't know
yeah,
if I don't understand.
the reason would be strategic. So it's an 8 hours worth of interview. And once the prosecution admits it into evidence, then the defense can show any other part of it. And so there was obviously, they made a strategic decision about something else in it that it wasn't worth trying to show. So maybe they'll show it in the next one. I got a little video here that has the picture of the taillight in it. Let me.
Yeah, I want you to show your picture of what the taillight looked like in the Sally Port, and then I want you to play.
Well, I
a
didn't have
clip.
time to. I didn't know I was going to have to line up pictures, so this is just one that I can have, that I happen to have handy. So, but go ahead if you have one you want to send me. Go ahead.
I don't have the picture in the Sally Port. I figure that's the most widespread picture out there. I'm more concerned about the testimony of the Barrows officer and how he described it. And that's the link that I sent you with the timestamp that shows, to me, the actual picture that's been blasted about with her taillight. It's pretty much gone. There are no red pieces left and no white piece. I mean, the whole thing's gone on the left or the right quarter panel. And this testimony of this officer just doesn't match that visual.
Having trouble finding this on the side. Yeah, this is I didn't know I was gonna have to be looking for these things, and that's why I don't always have them handy. What I have here is a video that Hillbilly Nitro helped us make up that zooms in, but he also has a picture of the taillight in it. But so here's the thing, but I don't know if this will answer your question, because it's going to be all right. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, why that's probably a little bit deceptive to you is that if that's all you've seen, this is just the corner, but you can see the red on the left there. The left side, yes, the left side of the taillight is completely intact.
Okay, but when you have an educated person that testifies on stand that it was cracked with a little piece missing and it wasn't completely gone, that is not what is.
That's what it would look like, covered in snow and snow filling up that housing there. But look at this picture here. This is from the driveway. We've zoomed in. Now you lose clarity zooming in. But this is from the driveway, from the side angle. You don't see it from the back, but this is that's what her taillight looked like in the morning. And then she would have plucked another little piece off in the driveway. But you can see it's shattered and missing significant pieces there.
I mean, that's tough to get me to beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm just so sorry.
No, listen, it's not that one single piece of evidence is going to get you there. It's a combination of things. Now we can
This
get
is
to
the crux of the case, though. The taillight is
Oh
where
no,
the conspiracy begins.
But there's no proof of any taillight planting. There's no evidence of any taillight planting. It's almost impossible that somebody had access to the taillight and could have buried it at the crime scene. And so, in the meanwhile, you do have a picture here that does show missing pieces. You can also see the picture of it at 8:22. Again, it's dash cam, so it's distant, but you can see it's missing pieces in this same spot. And you can see it goes on the tow truck, that it's missing pieces. And not only that, but when the guy that's driving it on the tow truck, he hits the brakes, and it's not red light that comes through, which it would be if the taillight was there. It's white light. And that's exactly what we find in the Sally Port. It's just, I don't have a better picture at the moment to show you the full picture of the Sally Port pictures. But this one here, that's a corner angle that they're taking in that picture up the top right. But the left side is intact. And that's, if you were standing behind it, that's what you would see. So I think Officer Barrows described it exactly as would be expected.
Would you play the video link that I provided and just?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sure.
Your
Absolutely.
viewers kind of get a.
Sure. Absolutely. It's loading up. Hold on one second. Let me. Takes a second to bring it in. All right. Boyfriend caught murder. Got it.
20350.
20350. Okay.
No, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's yourself, Trooper Proctor, and the sergeant from the state police, and if anyone else is going along with you.
I had an officer that was field training with me that day, and he was with me as well. And we went up to the residence.
And as you're walking up to the residence, what, if anything, did you come upon as you're going towards, say, any door or getting closer to the home?
I remained at the garage. The two troopers went to the front door and made contact with the homeowner.
Now, as far as you were there specifically for a vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Did you observe a vehicle in the driveway at any time?
Yes, we observed a black Lexus SUV in the driveway.
And what, if any, observations did you make to the rear area of that vehicle specifically?
At first, I did not go up to the vehicle. I just remained at the driveway and waited for the troopers to come back. And once they came back, they were let into the house through the garage. I had walked in with them briefly and then went back out to the garage and remained with the vehicle.
And as far as at any point in time, did you have any conversation with anyone named Karen Reed that day while you were at the house?
I did not.
Now, with respect to you come back out to the garage, is that correct?
Correct.
And the troopers
You got another minute.
are also correct?
Correct.
Now, at some point, do other vehicles come down to the driveway area of this residence that you were at?
I had contacted the highway superintendent after speaking with the troopers about how to retrieve the vehicle since the driveway was untouched and had about a foot of snow. I had made the decision that I would call the highway superintendent and see if that he would come and plow the driveway so that the tow truck would have access inside in the driveway.
And just in reference to this driveway, just if you could, not exact footage or anything, but how close is this Lexus SUV parked in relation to the roadway? How long is that driveway?
It's got to be about 150 feet off the roadway, if not more.
And if you recall, from where you're standing at the point of the garage, was what part of the vehicle was facing you? Was it the front of the vehicle, the back of the vehicle, the side of the vehicle?
I was looking at the left side of the vehicle.
And at some point, did you make any observations of the right rear part of that Lexus SUV?
I did.
And what, if anything, did you observe about that area of the vehicle?
I saw that there was some damage to the right rear taillight. To my best ability and recollection, that taillight was not completely damaged. It was cracked and a piece was missing, but not completely damaged.
And
Should I stop it there or should I keep going?
That's it. You started a little early, but yeah, that last
Sorry.
30 seconds was the key point.
Okay. Yeah.
So I just can't see somebody who had actual eyes on it, not us, not internet people, not looking at ring footage. He looked at it. He was there. He saw the snow. He lives in snow. He knows it. He still stated that there was some damage and it was not completely damaged. It was cracked and a piece was missing, but not completely damaged. That's pretty powerful in my opinion.
To me, he described it accurately. No, and honestly, it tends to show too that his testimony was honest and not in some way rigged. You know, he didn't go over and say, "Oh my God, it was." I mean, you got this taillight that it's covered in snow. The vehicle's covered in snow, and he wasn't tasked with doing a report on that taillight or studying it anyway. It's what he remembers from his glance at the taillight, and that he described it accurately. It's intact on one side and missing pieces on the other, and that's exactly how it's been in every case. And that's what you can't just look at something in isolation. You have to look at the overall pattern and every other piece of evidence. So this on the one hand, while there's no evidence that shows anyone lied or any evidence was planted, in terms of the other evidence, on the other hand, then you have this pattern that comes in that's pretty consistent and shows that it was missing pieces and there was no time to mess with it.
I mean, and that you can debate that. Like we don't have any clear footage from the Sallyport, and it doesn't take a lot of time. They only found, what, 5 pieces the night of the search. So it's not like they had to, you know, the plan didn't I mean, maybe they broke the whole thing and just planted a couple. Who knows? That's not my point. All they needed to do was smash it a little bit, grab a couple pieces. 3 of the 5 people from the Canton PD that were with the 7-member CERT team, they didn't know who 3 of those people were. It could have been Higgins. It could have been.
No, but this is I'm going to pull up the.
It doesn't matter who it could have been. There is this
I'm not, Dana, I'm not sure you're imagining how the crime scene looked. I'll see if I can find some video footage of this for you. It was 7 troopers of the CERT team shoveling inside a space that was they described it as shoulder to shoulder inside a very small space, overseen by the Lieutenant Tully. Now, there may have been some other cops hanging around there, but there's no way they walked out and buried that main piece 3 feet down in the crime scene in front of news cameras, and nobody noticed that. There's no way. This is where you ask me
what
where.
News cameras do you keep referencing? I've never heard of news cameras capturing any of this footage, because it would have to be better than the evidence shown in the trial.
NBC News. I've shown it many times on my channel. There was NBC.
Not when they're actually performing the search.
Sorry,
investigation.
NBC. Yes, it shows him walking out and start shoveling. It's WBZ News. WBZ News. I apologize.
I mean, you could have a picture of a cop walking across grass in the dark, and you could claim it to be from any time. I'm just saying.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's a news crook that's filming. Not obviously they're not suspecting that they're filming an elaborate conspiracy.
The CERT team from the Massachusetts State Department's going to let a news crew film their evidence collection? That's just unbelievable to me.
All right. Now I have to try to find it for you. But I mean, I wish you should have had me line these up earlier for you. But that's exactly what they did. I didn't know to have these stuff ready. I've been working on the book. Hopefully I can find it real quick. But I've showed it many times on the show. They weren't interfering with it. They were set up whatever across the street, fairly close. You can see them. Let's see if I can find this. It didn't come up under WC. Yeah, I think it's going to be too hard for me to try to find this because I have too many Karen Reed links here. But it's just multiple.
I mean, that's another thing I'll stand corrected at. But if you're going to say that while they were literally shoveling and scooping and collecting evidence, and news crew was filming it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's several clips of it. I'm not saying they filmed the entire thing from beginning to end. And I'm sure they probably did, and they only showed a small clip of it on the news.
Yeah, you could film somebody walking across a snowy lawn in the dark and have a overlay of this is that, Karen Reed, they're searching for evidence. It doesn't mean that it was that.
No, it really gives you a good sense of the crime scene because it shows you it shows you the space that they're digging in. It shows how many vehicles were on the street, cops with their lights on, and how well lit it was. I'm not here to say that every aspect of the investigation was perfect. I personally think that they should have dug out a much wider area. I think they should have dug longer. They started searching at about 20 of 6. They found the main piece at 5:45, and they stopped the search completely and went home at 6:22. They called it a night. I think they should have dug out a wider area and maybe would have found some more pieces instead of waiting for the snow to melt, which is what they ended up doing. But there would have been no way for anybody to walk into that crime scene and bury that piece was found. So you have to believe that the CERT team was in on it. There's no way around that because
I disagree. I don't think the CERT team was in on it at all.
No, this is not. Okay. If they weren't in on it, then there's no way somebody planted evidence there. That's at that time. Okay, you have to go through this logically. All right. So Lieutenant O'Hara, who you watched today, I think.
You're going through it. You're going through it like this is what should happen. But I'm
going through what did happen.
Well, you weren't there. I'm going through it like, do I think beyond a reasonable doubt that the lead CERT team guy didn't know 3 of the 5 Canton officers that are a little shady? You got to admit they're a little shady.
No, why do I have to admit that? I don't even know what you're talking about. There's been nothing establishing that anybody was shady there. There's nothing established and there's also nothing established. Well, there's nothing establishing that there's shady people on any police force. But no, they're really you're a lot of this stuff here. Like You're mixing up Birchmore. That was a Stoughton cop.
No,
that was not a
no,
Canton
like
cop.
destroying
I
your
mean,
phone and before a preservation order, that's not being shady.
destroying
Like
what?
destroying their cell phones before a preservation order, that's not being shady. Those same cops,
Those weren't Canton cops.
they doesn't necessarily mean they were Canton cops. They were in plain clothes, and he didn't recognize 3 of them. They
It's
could have
not,
been anybody.
but they weren't in the crime scene. They were watching from a distance. The crime
How do you
scene was because this again, back to logic. Lieutenant O'Hara, who runs the CERT team, testified that they would 7-man team was shoveling inside a space, and you can see it in the footage. He describes it as shoulder to shoulder, and he describes finding the main piece, the one that they show in the photo, at street level, so 3 feet down. All right, and he describes it vividly because he
I
describes
don't
how they
think
went
it's
through.
3 feet either. I don't think there was 3 full feet of snow.
There was not, but there was a 3-foot snowbank. This is why understanding is so important here.
All found on the snowbank. They were found, and that's another part of the problem. We don't know exactly where they were all
Okay,
found.
all right.
They were found in the yard. They were found in the snowbank.
Slow down, Dana. I want to just finish up on the Lieutenant O'Hara thing because this is just logic. All right. So if you don't believe that Lieutenant O'Hara was part of the conspiracy or was somewhere or was lying on the stand, then there's no way that that piece was planted under his watch. Okay, because he's overseeing a 7-man team in a small area. There's no way anybody else is walking out in the middle of an area the size of 2 parking spaces, and he's not going to notice. I don't care what other cops might have been hanging around across the street, and it's not surprising that there'd be cops hanging around watching an investigation like this. But there's no way that they walked out there and buried that thing. And yes, it was 3 feet, and the reason is understandable because. And this also goes back to why that main piece was not found by the Canton police at 7:30 a.m. The main piece, the most of the pieces were in the gutter and on the street after the impact. And around 5:30, it was plowed, presumably by Lucky, like he testified. And if you look in the dash cam video, and I was looking for this when the trial happened, you can see there is a plow bank there. It's small. It's about 1.5 feet tall, 1.5 feet wide. But that's plenty big enough to scoop up and bury the taillight pieces in it. And Lieutenant O'Hara describes when they're digging down, so you got this bank that the snow falls on top of that. So you have a plow bank that's maybe 1.5 feet, maybe a couple feet tall, and then on top of that, you have another 22 inches. That's how you get to somewhere near the 3 feet that Lieutenant O'Hara describes. And he describes vividly when they're digging down through that, they hit the harder snow of the plow bank down below. And you're from down south, so you probably haven't seen this, but that's how it is when you reach the plowed snow. It's heavier. And so that was buried. So unless Lieutenant O'Hara is in on this, it was not planted at that time. So the only way it could have been planted is if it was planted much earlier. But just think about the logic of this too, Dana. You're talking about planting evidence 15 hours, 16 hours after the crime. And there's no way of knowing that Karen didn't take a photo or her father didn't take a photo of that taillight. That's incredibly risky. Why would somebody ever take that risk?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, but back to your and I think I've shown that I've been more than willing to go back and listen to footage to like correct a memory of mine from the trial because I can't listen to the whole thing again.
Right, I don't blame you.
But the shoe was found by the curb. I specifically remember that. I don't remember, and I don't think that the taillight pieces were found at the curb. I thought that they were found in the yard, and they actually GPSed those in the yard as part of how they plotted his body.
I can understand.
Yes,
it is wrong, but I could understand why you think that. It's very understandable. So because the defense put a lot of attention on that. So the main piece, that corner piece, was found in the gutter, and several pieces were found in the gutter. Then some of the other pieces were only revealed over the next few weeks as we had warming weather and the snow melted, and so these things would appear.
This large piece that you're describing that was found at the curb.
Yeah.
How large is that piece?
It's the corner piece. I don't remember the specific measurement. I don't remember
Okay.
if it's the single biggest piece. I don't recall.
Because one of the parts of the testimony that I specifically went back to listen to was the accident reconstructionist, and I actually have a couple pictures of this. On the 18th of February, after they went back multiple times and found multiple parts and pieces up until whatever date. I know the 18th wasn't the first time they did that. I don't know the exact order of collection and all that jazz. On the 18th of February, they found, I can't remember, like 6 pieces. I have the screenshot of it. 2 of those 6 pieces, one was 7 inches long and red. The other was 6 inches long and red. So you're going to tell me that a 7-inch piece of plastic and a 6-inch piece of plastic wasn't found at 7 a.m. with minimal snow, with a leaf blower. Goodness. It wasn't found on a grid search with a CERT team that is certified to do that type of work and search at 7 p.m. or 6 p.m., 5:30 p.m. on the night of. But there was a bright red 6-inch piece and a bright red 7-inch piece of taillight found 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later.
It's like everything in this case. It's like everything in this case, Dana. It looks.
How do you go back earlier and find
hold
tiny
on.
pieces, and then on the 18th
All right,
find a 7-inch?
please just. I'm going to answer the question. I'm trying to. It's like a lot of things. They look really suspicious until you get the explanation, and then once you get it, you should hopefully accept it. That big piece that Alan Jackson pointed to, that's kind of an outlier because it's 30 feet away from where John found, and it's over near the fire hydrant, right? There were in an impact thing like that, an explosive impact. There's going to be a debris pattern, but then there are pieces that go outside of that. The pattern, there always do. They just bounce a certain way or whatever. Now, when the first responders were there from the Canton Police, they were not looking for taillight pieces. They were not. They never once took a shovel to that crime scene. Okay. By that time, there was several inches of snow. By the time those guys were searching, there was probably at least 6 inches of snow when it was coming down hard. The only area that they searched was the area around John's body. And that's why they found the cocktail glass. The cocktail glass had presumably stayed in his hand for a part of the journey and then ended up lying next to him. They were never going to take a shovel to a scene that they knew eventually the state police, the more qualified CERT team, would be searching. So they were never going to find any of those pieces that were buried in the snow. Now, should the state police CERT team have found them later, I think they should have probably dug a wider area, but they didn't. And those things became available only as snow melted. And that's what happens up here. Usually you get a couple of warm days. And when they had warm days, they were instructed, that came out in the trial testimony, they were telling the local cops to drive by and take a look because snow is melting and some more pieces might become exposed.
Well, I just sent you a link to a picture of the pieces that were found on February 18th. I have the testimony. If anybody wants to question the validity of that, I can also send you the testimony link too, if that's something that your chat wants to also see. But that was from February 18th. Those are huge pieces of taillight. And you know what? It just goes to show they went out there. We should look up what days did they find taillight pieces. And it was like 5 different days, 6 different days.
I know it's hard for you to imagine being a Southern girl. Snow melts. You got a piece like that lying on the ground. That's an outlier piece because it bounced off 15, 20 feet away, or one of these pieces actually ended up about 30 feet away. Or it could have been it could have eventually been shoveled there accidentally too, or it could have been plowed there. Some of these pieces could have got moved around over these weeks, but they're under snow. And even if that piece was 2 feet, it's a flat piece that's lying down. It's covered in snow. You're not going to see it unless you shovel that area. And they didn't shovel that area. They shoveled a relatively small area. And when they felt they had enough pieces to match to the car, they had the shoe, because they were tasked primarily with finding the shoe and finding some pieces. And that's what they found. And they called it a day and went home. Now, whether that's a typical investigation or not, I couldn't tell you.
It's not a typical investigation. If they really,
I think
I mean, they
Every
even offered the CERT team to come out the next day, and they declined them to come out because they knew that they didn't do the CERT team or O'Hare on the stand even said, I understand that this isn't, a complete search. It's dark. We are wearing headlamps. And he offered to come out the next day, and they declined it. And then
Okay.
that's when the rest of the people, over how many days, started finding all of these pieces of taillight.
None of which is suspicious. None of which in any way suggests a conspiracy. At best, it suggests that the investigation could have been a little bit more thorough. That's it. And then when you look at all the
reasonable doubt, it creates.
it does not create reasonable doubt when you look at the totality of the evidence. When you look at all of the evidence, such as the fact that John's phone never went in the house. Okay. But most importantly, when you look at the vehicle data, which shows that Karen, and especially when you correlate that with the GPS Waze data that's on John's phone, they're driving, following Waze to get to the house. They're on Cedar Crest Street, and Karen misses the turn onto Fairview. We know the exact time of that to the second. So Waze tells her to turn around. She does a 3-point turn, a few houses down on Cedar Crest. She does a 3-point turn. Now, because she did kind of a rough, she hit the accelerator at more than 30% while it was in reverse. That triggered the creation of an event in the vehicle data.
Oh, wait,
and
pause,
so
pause,
Go
pause.
ahead.
She hit it at more than 30%, so it created the triggering event.
Yes.
Because it was in the snow.
No. So I hate to get into the weeds, but I know you're very smart, so you might like this. I'll try to make this really quick. But in your car, you have the black box, which is known as the EDR, okay, and it's recording data continuously. However, it only records about 5 seconds of it, and then it overwrites that, unless an event is triggered. So if you get in a collision, so if you hit the street light, it'll take a snapshot from 5 seconds before you hit the street light and 5 seconds after. So in the vehicle data, there will be what's called a triggered event, and it'll be a 10-second snapshot. Now, there was no snapshot created by the black box, the EDR. In this case, as the ARCA guys testified, that's typical in a pedestrian strike because of the difference in size between the objects. However, in Toyota Lexus vehicles, there is also a system called TechStream that does the same thing, but it's a little more sensitive. Its algorithm, it records a little bit more. And in this case here, an event was triggered, and it had to do with the fact that Karen's hit the gas at over 30% while in reverse. So the parameters are set up that way. So that just created a 10-second snapshot at that time. And that was when they were just doing a 3-point turn on Cedar Crest. Now, 8 minutes and 4 seconds after that event is another event. And that's the one where Karen is going backwards at almost 25 miles an hour for several seconds. And that's when John was struck. John was struck force, and it correlates perfectly. If you look at that, it shows, if you match the timing on those events, that says that John was struck around 12:32 and maybe 10 seconds, somewhere in that range. Well, coincidentally or tellingly, John's health app shows that he last moved at 12:32 and 16 seconds. So a few seconds after that. It correlates in a bulletproof way. There's nothing else that could have happened.
Well, the TechStream, I did go back and listen to the TechStream data because that was very sluggish live,
Yeah.
I must admit. And I
don't
wanted
blame
to
you.
understand it. I didn't really even care to understand it until I listened
I don't blame you.
until I listened to the jury comment. And then I'm like, okay, now I have to go back and try to understand it.
Mhm.
And it, you know what? It's still confusing. And I hold that to it shouldn't have been confusing. And then I listened to Trooper Paul's testimony in its entirety. Oh my gosh, I did. And part of it was his text stream talk. He didn't even have any experience with text stream before this trial. He didn't know. He didn't. He admitted it on the stand. He has
Yeah.
he should never have been allowed. Well, there's many opinions of him, but he should never have specifically been allowed to testify to text stream data at all.
Well, it's but I think there's some misconceptions about this. He is trained on vehicle data. Okay. He just had not been trained on text stream data. But it's not like he's going out there and looking at bits and zeros and interpreting what's going on. No, he's uploading the text stream to the program and then running to a disk and then running it through the program, and it puts out a reading. And
I'm
then
gonna
he's interpreting.
I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
simplify the text stream data, and I think as live as I was listening to it going on, all I could think about is it's snowing. Yeah, you're going to hit the gas. It doesn't really prove anything. And if you want to think it proves something, you're going to believe it. But if you want to,
It has nothing to do with that. It has, and the fact that the snow has no relevance to it either. And it's just
they didn't prove it, and I don't believe it. And if I was a juror, I would have
they.
completely disregarded the text stream stuff.
Listen, you're right, because here's the thing. Trooper Paul was not given the phone data. So it was Trooper Garino that had the phone data. They considered that was their separate spheres. So the key thing is to correlate those two. And the state needs to either give that data to Trooper Paul or have an independent accident reconstructionist come in to do that correlation. But that correlation, which was not well presented in the trial, is bulletproof. And it's the fact that you have these two triggered events, and the second one comes 8 minutes and 4 seconds after the one, and you know their times because you can match it to the GPS and to the Waze data. And then that second event, not only does it show that she went backwards with the throttle at 75%, reaching 25 miles an hour she had it throttled for several seconds at least. And you also have within that the telltale signs of striking a smaller object. But like I said, even if you don't know about the striking the smaller object, you also have at the time that she did that's a few seconds before John's phone moves for the very last time. And
I have a separate thought about all of the GPS and Apple data. But as far as the text stream stuff, I'm sorry, I can't trust Trooper Paul. And at this point, I don't know who would be able to trust unless it was a Lexus expert that came in and explained that. And then the only question that would make me agree or disagree with you would be like the RPMs and the revs of the tires on ice or snow. Like, your tires spin. They spin for a reason. It creates RPMs. If she was spinning on snow or ice, it would increase her RPMs, thus increase the speed in the car. So unless I have somebody that I trust and is like an actual expert on Lexus text stream, that testimony was useless to me. That's just from my perspective. Useless.
I think maybe you're looking a little bit for a reason to dismiss it, but look, I had the same question about the tires spinning early on. Could that create a false impression of speed when the tires were just spinning in the snow? And I don't know the answer to that. I do know that data is a printout. It's not Trooper Paul divining it, like I said, from the bits within the data. It's what he had to learn how to do was to make sure you could extract that data from the vehicle without losing it. And that was done in the presence, I believe, of a defense. That's where they do it. They bring in someone from the defense team as a witness when it's done, because it's a risky process. And if they make a mistake, it gets destroyed. So these are the kind of things that they do with someone from the defense team brings in their own expert. It has to be scheduled in advance. And then he's just running it through a program to read the software. He's not like imagining it. But even if the speed was off, the simple fact is that at the same time that happened, within seconds, John last moved. That's beyond coincidence.
Well, I on a technicality, I disagree, because the text stream data only records miles. It does not record a time. The 8 minutes between events, you are correct about, because I actually watched that enough to absorb it. Yep. Yes, that's correct. It was on the same key cycle. It was 8 minutes apart, and it was on the same mile. So yes, that was correct. The time of that event, we don't know.
Yes, but it has to be. We do know it, but not from the text stream. You're correct. It does not have a timestamp within the text stream. It just counts from the beginning of the key cycle to the end. But we can correlate that time with John's phone, because what they found in the vehicle data was a 3-point turn. And we know that Karen did a 3-point turn on Cedarcrest Avenue because she missed the turn. And that's in the GPS data. That's in the Waze. The Waze is saying turn around. And so that's in the data. You can see, and you go to Trooper Garino's testimony, and he's got a map that shows it there. It shows the GPS points plotting the entire trip that they took and the turnaround where they did it on Cedarcrest. And so we know within several seconds, and I bet the state knows. Well, the state's going to know exactly which time is associated with each one of those GPS points. But I can only go by what the state revealed, and they didn't reveal that, so they didn't tell us what time the turn was. But what they did tell us was to the second what time they missed the turn onto Fairview, and then what time to the second, and it was 30 seconds later that they got back to Fairview and now took a right-hand turn on it. So if you estimate that the 3-point turn was somewhere in the middle of that, the missed turn and then the later, and then if you put it in the middle of that, then that puts it right around 12:24 exactly. Maybe, but I would say maybe to be even more precise, probably 12:24 and 2 seconds, maybe 4 seconds. But there's a little there's a plus or minus margin of error there at this point. But then 8 minutes and 4 seconds after that is at 12:32 and say 8 seconds. And that second event, when John was struck, was 4 seconds into that event. So that means John was struck at about, according to that, somewhere around 12:32 and 12 seconds. And that matches up perfectly.
All right. I'm going to kind of reset a little bit because I'm tired of talking about text stream and stuff.
Okay.
So going back to my original thought of what creates the most reasonable doubt for me, I'm going to kind of hit some topics, and we've talked about some of them. I've already said the injuries. We haven't talked about ARCA, but I didn't even know about ARCA before I had my injury opinion, and ARCA is a whole different set of, whatever.
Yeah.
So I have injuries, and then my next was Apple data, which that's what made me pause and reset. So the Apple Health data.
Mm-hmm.
I had on there Officer Barris's testimony. And then the poor investigation, they didn't interview the people. Proctor should have recused himself because of his family ties with the Alberts. And then I come back to after you absorb the totality of this trial, I guess you could say, you can hear all of your pros and your arguments, all of mine. It doesn't make any sense to me, along with all of the other questionable things that happen. Why didn't the Alberts come out of their house in the morning when all of those cops and, ambulances and fire trucks there? I know they didn't have their lights on. I'm not saying they came down ablazing.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot convince me they didn't know what was going on. Even Jen McCabe went into the house, came back out. They did not come out of the house at all. That is so shady to me, and it creates just a gut problem, not a proof problem. Just, why didn't you come out of the house? What normal person isn't going to see fire trucks in front of your own home and say, nah, I'm cool. It's too early. I'm just going to keep going. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Can I address it?
Yep.
Okay. And then I'll address this one, and then I'll stop. And if any on the rest of your list, I mean, I have an answer for all of those things, and we can go into anyone you want if you want to. So, but as far as that, yes, it bothered me a lot too. And initially, I imagined it because I lived most of my life in the city, and I'm thinking they're coming in, sirens blaring, But that's not how it is in the suburbs in Massachusetts. And actually, where I live now, it dawned on me later on, like, no, they don't at night. They don't put the sirens on. So there's no sirens, just the lights on. And actually, that was confirmed by the dash cam video. They didn't have the sirens on. And people would say, well, Karen was screaming a lot at the scene. Why didn't they hear that? And the engines on some of those trucks on a fire truck can be pretty loud too, right? Why didn't they hear that? It was explained perfectly by Officer Goody, Sergeant Goody. They were in the blizzard, and a blizzard has to do with wind more than snow. The winds were going 50, 60 miles an hour. That absorbs the sound so much that as Sergeant Goody said, even standing next to someone yelling to them, you had a hard time understanding it. So when you're looking at the house, which is about 70 feet away, you got people sleeping behind storm windows and the wind is absorbing. It doesn't surprise me at all that they were heavy sleepers like
So
that.
pause. You say we could still hear Karen Reed screaming on the whatever her voicemail and the
Yeah.
911 call, if I can remember. I don't really remember that.
Right.
And then you said you can't hear anybody. So only the one person heard her say the actual words, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. So if it's all this loud and crazy, how did so many people hear her say that so clearly? Well, actually, I say that loosely. I think only
Yeah,
one person heard her say that.
I'm not at all saying.
I think it was lost in the chaos, to be honest.
Dana, I'm certainly not saying that it was actually impossible to speak to somebody next to you. When you're in a storm like this, what Goody was describing is that the wind is gusting, and when it's gusting, it's very difficult to hear. And then there might be moments where it's not gusting as much. But you would certainly be able to hear people near you. But to go across the lawn 70 feet, then through a storm window, that sound is going to be much more absorbed.
They
And then you have
displayed on camera on the trial that Jen McCabe went into the house during all the commotion, or during at least when all of the, maybe after John O'Keefe was taken
I don't know what that
away.
has. What is that? What does that have to do with them waking up? So I'll tell you what happened again.
Why
So-
didn't they come out and be like, "What's going on? What's happening?"
Okay, this is
OMG.
This is because this is what happened. All right. So Jen called her sister twice and she didn't wake up. She called her brother-in-law inside the house and he didn't wake up. So after John was taken away, she went into the house. The door was unlocked. She walked up to the second floor window and woke them up. So they were sound asleep. And Brian Albert and Nicole got dressed. And as Brian was coming down the stairs, Officer Lank from the Canton Police was already inside the door waiting for him. And so at that point, John was gone. They had no reason to go out.
Was that like 7 o'clock? What time was that? It was like 7.
No, that was like 6:30, I'd say. I'm not sure. Might have been 6:25. Might have been 6:25. But so by the time Brian Albert and his wife were coming down the stairs, John was already on the way to the hospital. There was nothing going on outside but a blizzard, and Officer Lank was in the house. And so I don't know what the chances are of Brian Albert going out and interfering in an investigation that's going on outside his house. What incentive he would have to do that, I don't know, but he didn't do it. And I don't think it's really that unusual. Again, when you stack it up against all of the other evidence, it's not unusual at all. But
Well, I think the opposite. When you stack it up against all of the other questionable things that we haven't even discussed, it stands out brighter and brighter.
okay, pick another one off your list. Pick another one that bothers you the most.
So I didn't, besides all the things that I chatted to you about, I mean, and when I say, like, it's the totality of the evidence that creates the reasonable doubt. It's not one specific thing. I can get behind your story about it was windy and they didn't come out, and they came out she woke them up and they came out at 6:30. I can get behind that if that's just the thing we're talking about. But when you talk about the totality of all of the things and all of the,
but this is the problem. 95% of these are easy to explain. And then it's
the totality of the evidence and how
totality. That's what I'm saying.
reasonable
95%. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dana, but 95% of that, what you consider to be odd things, are actually explained. And there's still a 5% that's unexplained. For instance, they found 5 pieces of glass on the bumper, and one of them was matched to the cocktail glass.
No, it was not. No, it was not. I have that testimony. I have it ready to go. You ready? It was not matched to the glass. That glass on the bumper did not match that drinking glass at all.
One of the pieces was pretty definitively matched to it. 2 of them were matched to that type of glass, but not specifically to that glass, meaning they couldn't find a matching piece to it. And the other 2 were unidentified.
But how are you getting that testimony if I'm listening to the testimony at trial?
That's what I heard at trial, and I took notes.
Well, I
listened to it, and I
got a link for you. Let's go with another link. That was one of the specific things that I disagreed with you about. All
right, let's come back to that one because we're already getting late to go into a long piece of the trial. But we'll both listen to it again, and we can go over this again privately, or you're welcome to come back anytime too. We can have a part 2. But what are some of the my point of saying? But I just wanted to say my point of saying that there are things that I think are unexplained. So at the very least, we agree that there were two pieces of glass that we don't know for sure where they came from, and that's odd, right? Is there glass on everybody's bumper? I don't know. So there are, but pretty much everything else you're saying is a long list there, but everything's been explained. Like
you can make an explanation. Okay, like I said, if we talk about each individual topic in a vacuum, I'm not going to disagree with you that you could be wrong or couldn't be right. It is the totality of the evidence. So when we talk about all of these things, and I'll give you a couple more. So I have the Alberts didn't come out of the house.
Yeah.
The CERT team, O'Hare didn't recognize 3 of the 5 officers.
Means nothing. Why would he?
Like just weird stuff in general. Like,
why would he recognize Canton cops who are hanging around there? I don't even understand that point.
Why wouldn't he have it in his report? That's part of
why would he have in his report things that are outside of his investigation, people that were standing across the street and happened to be hanging around watching it, or a neighbor that was out or whatever? I don't know why that would be in his report. And I don't
know how you know that they're standing across the street. All that was said was that they were there, and he only recognized 2 out of 3 of them. That was the statement at trial. Like there was nothing more about
there doesn't mean inside looking, digging with you. It means there, meaning somewhere near the
either. It's open to your interpretation. My interpretation is he was close enough to talk to them, but not close enough to know who they are. He recognized 2 of them, so they weren't across the street.
It's just a common sense explanation. There's nothing unusual there. You have a 7-man team digging within a very small, tiny area. There's no way that the defense certainly would have brought up to you, hey, were those guys inside that area with you? The defense didn't bring that up because it's kind of crazy. So I don't think that really there's anything odd there. There's nothing to mine there for your side.
I have something fun to talk about because I wrote this down. So the cell phone data and all of the, we haven't even talked about Apple Health data, which I don't know how you can, and I said this in my little paraphrase to you, I don't know how you can completely get on board with GPS to 100% certainty and beyond a reasonable doubt if they're going to completely exclude the Apple Health data from John O'Keefe's phone.
Sure, let me take a moment.
I can't have one without the other.
Yeah, but not all data is equal. All right. So for instance, you've heard of triangulation, right? Which is where you can use cell towers.
Yeah.
All right. So, but that's accurate depending on how many cell towers there are. In an area like Canton, it's accurate to within 500 feet. So that's just by comparison. So GPS, which is from a satellite that's reaching GPS chip in your phone, that's generally accurate within 15 feet. There's no way to fudge it, and there's no way to fudge it.
It does. It does have a little bit of variance depending on weather and whatnot, and of course, but that wasn't even something that I wanted to talk about.
But at every single point in that variance, you know what the variance is because the signal strength is always measurable from second to second. So if that margin of error is 15 feet, but now all of a sudden there's something blocking the satellites, it'll tell you exactly how much it's, what the signal strength is. And you see that in the report. So there was a period of about 3 or 4 seconds where the signal got weak enough that the margin of error expanded enough to include the house. But it was only for those 3 or 4 seconds. But the Apple Health app is interpreting your motions. Okay. It's going to be it's not a reliable thing to be used for things like that. And we know kind of the reason why. So I looked just the other day at based on the GPS that was given to us. So in that time when Rich Green from the defense says the stair climbing began, in that period where they traveled from there to Fairview, you can go and do this at home. You can match it. Do you know what the speed they were going turned out to be? It was 15 miles an hour, which is really slow and really unusual. And that's not the way Karen was driving. So I would suggest there was probably a period where they came to an intersection and were arguing about whether to proceed. Karen wanted to go home. So they may have stopped for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds. And then she hit the gas, and that came up with the average of 15. But so the car was going slow at different periods there. There is a change in elevation. And I'm going to report something different that I discovered on my own, believe it or not. And I'm an idiot. it occurred to me that you wouldn't know this because from being down south, but when you're in a cold car like this that hasn't moved for several hours, it was 18 degrees outside. It takes about, in weather like that, 6, 7, 8 minutes to warm up. And then as soon as it does, you blast that heat to warm up your car. And I researched this to make sure. I was like, would that change the barometric pressure inside the car? And the answer was yes. And that is how an Apple phone determines stairs and elevation. Is primarily it has a barometric altimeter inside your phone.
You sound like you can become an expert witness.
Yeah, I had to use I had to use ChatGPT to search this, but so anybody can go on to ChatGPT and do this. If you raise the temperature from 18 degrees to 75 degrees, that results in a change of barometric pressure that is the equivalent of 30 feet, 3 stories.
Okay.
And so there's,
all right, pause your expertise in Apple Health data for a minute there, because I'm not an Apple Health data expert, and nor are you.
No.
All I'm saying is I logically and thoughtfully can't accept that the GPS data couldn't be off by 30, 40, 50 feet or 80 feet or 100 feet or whatever it was, and then just completely dismiss the Apple Health data, because
it can't be off because you always know the signal. The signal is always recorded, the signal strength.
There could be debate about how, like, to the 15-foot radius accuracy that could be. But let me get to my point. My point is, if you're asking a level-headed person to exclude Apple Health data about making however many steps it was, 80 steps and then more steps and then 3 flights of stairs, I don't think that that's fair. Like, you can't ask, and even if you want them to exclude it, that is the definition of reasonable doubt. Like, even if you take away all of the things about the taillight and all of the other stuff, like, you look at me, I have things in a vacuum. Injuries, Apple Health data, because I can't exclude it if GPS is there. But hey, let's pause that thought. My thought was, I mean, they used Apple Health data in Murdaugh for steps and all that stuff. And I don't know. And they even used a little bit of the data from, like, the very, very deep extractions of the phone about how the touch screen worked and how the light turns on and when you flip your phone. And I only have one other case that I'm only kind of familiar with. I was watching a Murdaugh 2020 episode, and right after that episode came on a case about this kid named AJ Armstrong. And it's a case out of Texas. It was mistried 3 times before he was convicted. It's kind of a crazy case, but not in conspiracy wise, but like, the whole case was about his phone data. And the fact that this case didn't provide, like, well, when was the last time his phone was turned on? Did anybody turn it off? When was the screen illuminated? Who hit buttons? Like, was this text message read? Was it not read? Nobody on either side testified about those tiny little details that made a difference in that case and in Murdaugh. Like, when Murdaugh was accused of throwing the phone out of the car window, but the screen didn't turn on, they knew that phone screen illuminated at XYZ time.
But that answers your question there. That phone, because there was a question of whether it was thrown out the window. That's why
the
those
screen illuminated. So even
but there was no reason to look at those things in this case here, because
why not? If you're
if there's no question of anybody.
Convinced me. If the Commonwealth said his phone was at, just giving you examples from other trials, his phone was at 67% at 12:32, and by 6:06 or whatever time they had it back in the station, it was at this point. This is the last read text message, not received. This was the last time that the text message was read. This was the last time his screen illuminated. This was the last time the Face ID tried to open the screen.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't matter, they didn't tell me that they tried. If they would have told me that they tried, then I would believe your side more. I don't understand why none of that specific like teeny
Because
tiny
I
little
don't really understand why you want them to look up irrelevant things or talk about them in trial.
because you're proving the
Because
case. The
no,
phone
it's
is
no,
very
but you don't. We'd still be the trial would still be going on now if that's the case. I mean,
mm,
these are things that were relevant in that trial because there's a question of whether the phone was thrown out the window.
no,
That's why they
there's
looked
a
at those
question in
things.
the Karen retrial. How did his phone get underneath his body when he landed, getting thrown XYZ feet from the car? There are questions phone related in this case that data could have helped answer if I knew if they even tried to find it, whether it be the prosecution or the defense. Like I know
Right.
it just could help. Like I maybe I know too much. Maybe I've watched too many, like that AJ Armstrong case was
Mhm.
literally about the light turned on, the screen illuminated. He used a screen to walk down the hallway, like and used it as a flashlight. They
Right.
know all these tiny little things that happen with the phone, yet we don't know these tiny little things that happened to John O'Keefe's phone.
Right.
And he
Well,
was
no,
murdered
I think that
or
I think
died.
it's good. I mean, I think it would have been really fun to be going over this case with you back in April of 2023 and asking these kind of questions and for months and like, could you get to because this is all that I try to do and other people that I've talked to, so you dig around and you see what's relevant and what you can get answers for. But I don't think you're going to get answers for every single question in this case based
But
on
they
what might
should
have
be
been
there. That
maybe.
question should be there. If the
Well,
cell phone extraction was done correctly, all of that information is there.
there's plenty of stuff that was in the cell phone and extraction that was not discussed in the trial because it was not something that was considered to be one side wanted to bring up or the other. So that doesn't mean it wasn't there. Um, the defense has not raised this as an issue, and they have the extraction. So both sides get the exact same copy of the cell phone extraction in any
Agreed.
case.
Agreed.
And so if the defense didn't bring it up, I don't know. I mean, you could maybe bring that up with them. Maybe they'll find some way of mining that's useful for them.
I don't care what
But it
site uses it. It's a question that I would like answered, whether it proves me right or wrong. I just know that information exists.
but
And
if the defense didn't bring it up, why are you using it as a basis for reasonable doubt when it was probably in the extraction? It's just not something the prosecution thought it was important enough. They also didn't say what time the phone was turned on and what time he got home from lunch. Those things were in there, but they weren't important. So if they were important, the defense could bring them up, and then the prosecutor could say, "Yes, we know this." So I'm not sure why those things would be the basis for any doubt.
it's not, it's, well, it's, I've explained why that's my reasonable doubt is because not, it, I know that information exists and it would prove a lot about how John's phone came to its final standing point. And that's important. They did that in Murdaugh. It's, I don't know. Like I'm shocked that it didn't come up. That's all.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, it could be interesting. Actually, I mean, I think it's a good point that because the phone possibly landed there, seems to have landed there. So could they have got any kind of information from that? Maybe that's something that both sides could look into. Maybe that does tell us something, right? Knowing the evidence the way it is, the more they dig, they're only just going to find more that helps the prosecution. But so thank you. It's a good idea. I think it's something that maybe they can look into. Both sides can try to see if they can find something there because they have that data. So
Yeah.
both sides would have it.
Well, I wanted to, like, instead of being more argumentative, go to more conversational, like,
Okay.
ideas. Like,
Yep.
do you think that Proctor should have recused himself?
All right. So this is thank you, Dana. So I didn't know. So I'm ignorant about how so much of this thing worked, and you learn during the course. So I thought that state troopers their office is based in the barracks, these homicide investigators, and they come out to the scene. That's not the way it works. So they're assigned to the detectives unit for each county, the prosecutor's office. Okay. So in Norfolk County, where this took place, there were only four troopers assigned to the detectives unit. So that's Proctor, Buchanan, and two other guys who we don't know their names. So it's not that easy to just recuse yourself and get somebody else because you only had four. In fact, my understanding is that already one of them was out of town. So they made the decision. Trooper Proctor told Buchanan that he did have somewhat distant connection to the Proctors. I'm sorry, to the Alberts through Chris's wife. And Buchanan decided, okay, it's not relevant here, so let's just continue on. And so I'm sure they maybe wish they would do that different now, but it's not. I'm just explaining that the way it works, it's not that easy because there's actually only 4 people assigned to that whole unit. And it's not like you can bring someone else in from another unit. It's during a blizzard.
Yeah, I have no idea about any of what you're mentioning about how it works behind the scenes, but
yeah,
I just think it's pretty obvious that he should not have been on this case.
Does it help you though, knowing that there were only 4 of the total team that are assigned to the detectives unit for that county?
No, because not that, I mean, trying to be very open-minded, the Buchanan didn't have any close ties with him. I don't even know if he showed up on the scene. I don't know. The thing that plays out in everybody's mind is when Proctor arrives or is assigned, he knows them. He knows his sister, right? His sister is good family friends with him.
His sister is friends with Chris Albert's wife.
Correct. Yeah. So to me, it's like that's it. It doesn't look good. It doesn't smell good. And again, it's the totality of the evidence. You put all these other shady things that happened. And it's like, well, what if Proctor wasn't even involved? That's why you recuse yourself. This is the entire point of recusal. You stay away. You're like, nope, not doing it. He didn't do that. And
again, I don't,
it either fuels the conspiracy or, it just doesn't smell good. He shouldn't have been doing any of that. And then you can sidebar all the Canton, like Canton was supposed to be recused, but they weren't literally off the case. They were at every turn. Maybe not.
Pretty much. They were off. They didn't participate in any of the interviews. That was the main thing.
The evidence was held in their evidence lockers at their department. Like it.
Yes, but this, and again, I learned a reason for this too. Now, no evidence was stored there. The only evidence that was stored there was the stuff that was gathered that morning by the Canton police. So naturally, it was at their evidence. But none of that evidence was used because all they had. Well, I'm sorry, I take that back. The only piece that was used was the broken cocktail glass, and so the state police did take that into custody. As far as the blood evidence, they threw that out. They deemed that to be not important by then. So, and of course, the vehicle was stored there, but it's prosecuted from the Norfolk DA's office, which is in Canton, 1 mile away. So it makes sense to put the vehicle closest to the investigators and the prosecutors.
I've heard you talk about the Sallyport things. I mean,
yeah, okay.
Do I care that they brought it there? No, but it opens the door for. I mean, that literally opened the door for the conspiracy. The Proctor being there, family, friends. If it wasn't brought as close to Canton and to the 34 Fairview, there would have been no way. There would have been no question about the possibility of being planted. You say there's none. There is a window. It's a small window, but it's there.
It's very tiny. And the thing is we shouldn't really fault them for not foreseeing that there was going to be this incredible conspiracy theory that at every step of the way is incredibly unlikely. And the thing that people have to remember here is that if without the conspiracy theory, Karen is guilty. There's no middle ground. It's not like, so a lot of times in police investigations, and a lot of them are sloppy. Maybe that might even be the norm, at least with hindsight. When you look back at things, you'll always find some examples of sloppiness. And a lot of the problems that I've seen in other cases is that the investigators get tunnel vision. And because of that, they lock in on somebody unfairly and the real killer goes free. But this isn't that kind of case because there's no chance that some other vehicle did this because it was her taillight pieces that were found at the scene. And much other evidence, Well,
I agree. I can agree with you.
Either there's a vast conspiracy or she did it. Yeah.
Either she did it and the injuries are just, I still can't get past the injuries and the scratches on his arm. I just can't get there. So,
and that is a compelling point. I want to make sure that you understand that I agree with you on this, Dana, because I don't want to all,
But that's where it starts for me. That's what made me go,
yes, and
WTF.
if the state does not come up with a better explanation for exactly how those injuries occurred, they're going to lose again,
Yeah,
or at
but
least it'll be a
they
hung
didn't do
jury.
it the first time. So are you
They
convinced
didn't.
beyond a reasonable doubt at that trial? No, you heard all the
Well,
experts.
you know,
There's
like
no way that
yeah,
you can
I'm gonna
convince her beyond a reasonable doubt. We can talk about it and you can tell me you think she's guilty. But if you were on a jury and you are being wholeheartedly honest with yourself, you don't believe the injuries, then you can't convict.
again, I'm going by the evidence that was in the trial and having myself looked at it for a long time. As I said at the start of the show, I can totally understand why a jury, knowing nothing all about the case and just sitting there, would have reasonable doubt. For me, even though I think the state did a terrible job. And I said this during the trial that I don't think the state's going to win because they didn't. I said it. You can go back and see clips on my show during the trial that I don't think they're going to win because they blew it. They didn't explain the injuries very well. However, there's enough evidence for me to feel extremely confident beyond a reasonable doubt that she did it. Now, I hope they'll have a better explanation in the next trial. And I think the best explanation for what happened to John and what caused those injuries on the arm is going to be the taillight housing. And so Kara's here. She's someone that's done a good job looking at this. She's someone in chat that if John's elbow is bent, when that taillight hits the arm, so the elbow breaks the taillight, the corner piece off, and it's just the corner piece. But that inside housing there has little tiny, I don't know, plastic support pieces that hold up normally the plastic. And now they're exposed. And with the arm bent like this, you can see where they would create parallel tracks just like that. But again, Trooper Paul didn't explain that. So somebody needs to explain that to a jury. So I think I agree with you on that.
Trooper Paul is toast, man. There's no way he is getting a second chance at any bite of any of those apples.
Oh no, they won't. There's no choice in that because he was the investigator that gathered the vehicle data. So they may bring someone else in to talk about. He's definitely going to be a part of the trial.
He might be a foundation witness,
Yeah,
but he
yeah,
would not be
right.
an expert witness.
Right,
He
right.
can't be an expert witness in anything. I mean,
Well,
and to be honest,
I mean,
I have like a sidebar question.
Yeah.
I really haven't watched a lot of trials. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm a true crime junkie or anything because I'm really not. I started
I'm not
watching.
either. I'm not either.
I started watching in 2020 when I was tired of politics and I started watching the Johnny Depp trial. So that's how I started branching out into the YouTube world of attorneys and stuff. So anyways, my point being is that if oh, now I lost my train of thought. So what were you talking about? I totally lost myself.
I forget what were we talking. We're talking about the injuries and Trooper Paul's explanation. And I can,
Yeah. So
okay,
I've never seen in any trial where every single expert witness is a department guy, your tech guy, Garino, Trooper Paul. I've always seen expert witnesses be hired out because it looks better because and especially in this situation where it's a corruption like situation. And then
well, they brought in two, right? They brought in Ian Whiffen and Jessica Hyde.
And we haven't even talked about 227. I don't care. I will give you 227. I don't know. It's a battle of the experts. Cancel each other out. Let's move on. But I liked having them in because they're third party. I don't care if it's a battle of the experts on whoever. But when you're talking corruption and regardless of whether you're on board or not, and Birchmore and all this other stuff, there is a very real apparent corruption possibility issue in that area. So when you have Trooper Paul, who's your super unqualified accident reconstructionist with no degrees in just math classes and whatever qualifications he got in trooper school, paired with Garino, who also works in office, all these people who are expert witnesses work in office. I have never noticed that in any other trial that I've watched, and maybe that's compounding my negativity, but
it's an expense to bring in. You have to pay somebody outside to bring them in. I just want to say Trooper Paul has done this job for 9 years. That's that job specifically. and apparently teaches the other guys on the job. Now, I'm not excusing. He hasn't had to testify in that many cases. I believe he's only testified in 7 cases in those 9 years. Well, this was the 6th one, actually, the Karen Reed case. Most recently, he testified in another case and supposedly did a lot better, and they got the conviction. So I'm not, I don't think we should make it seem like he's completely unqualified. But there were things that need to be. But well, I mean, anyways, he does have qualifications. Trooper Garino, his evidence was fine, and there's really no way to fudge GPS data. It's and I thought he explained it. I thought he articulated it very well. So
well, and you mentioned this earlier in like your intro, and I had on my list about Guarino issues. I guess I'm logically thinking that if he did anything, who knows? I don't really know what goes on, but there are Brady issues involved with extractions. And if he did something with an or didn't give an extraction or piece it, I don't know. I would assume that would be easily caught. My problem with him is and I do question your comment earlier. I wrote it down and I don't know what I did with it. You mentioned that only the feds can get access to iCloud data.
It's much easier for him. I mean, that's a better way to say it. It's much easier for him. Apple responds to it.
Well, not that what your comment is crap, but that is crap if that's true, because clearly it's a problem. And again, like me saying I'm not a sleuthy goosey, but in the Lori Vallow trial, all of those, like, and Chad Daybell, both of them, most of the data they got was from the iCloud. So I have a really hard time believing, or what makes more sense is that he is a lazy MFer and he didn't care to do his job well to get to the bottom of it. That makes more sense to me.
Well, that may be true. I don't, we'll have to keep an open mind, both of us, and see how it evolves and see what comes out. We don't know the situation right now.
But I think that would be a horrible thing to blanket across police stations, that they don't access iCloud data. That would be the dumbest thing in the world to me. It makes no sense. Or you're just literally incompetent and you're not doing your job right, because who doesn't know that the cloud exists, right? If you're only going to do a cell phone extraction, you're doing a half-assed job.
And we may learn that the state police wanted to get that extraction and asked the feds for help. In that press conference from Josh Levy, there was no indication that he believed there was any wrongdoing on the part of the state police. And he has incentive to want to do that if there was. But what, time will tell. I mean,
incompetence is a defense. It's obvious, but incompetence is a defense, which it's obvious. It's obvious.
Well, it's not
if it's
obvious.
True. I mean,
if it's true, again, there's no evidence yet at this point.
You're dumb. You're not doing your job. So that's my position on Guarino. Like, that's just ridiculous.
We'll have to see. At this point, we don't know. Like I said, he may have reached out through the attorney general, because we know that, in fact, supposedly even Officer Lank, who many people accuse of being part of these conspiracies, wrote a letter, I think, to the attorney general saying that we need help here. There's something went on here. So, and there was also someone from the Stoughton police that had reached out to this channel last fall when we did a show on this, so a year ago. And they gave their reasons why they think something was going on this case. They said that he was, that Farwell was in that video. Have you seen that video where he gets on the elevator, basically goes up and kills her?
Yeah.
He's wearing a mask. Now, it's during the pandemic, but they said he's a guy that fought wearing the mask. So there's no way he'd be wearing a mask there. So my sense is that the troopers and the local police felt something was up here and were just not able to get the answers they needed and reached out to the feds for help. But time will tell. That may not be the case. Maybe we'll find out, there's something more to it. But at this point, we just don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, the whole feds thing is also another layer of curiosity. Like, you have to ask yourself, clearly these jurors had no idea that the feds were behind that, the ARCA guys. And I'm sorry, like, I don't need the ARCA guys. The ARCA guys make everything logical in my mind, and I believe what they say. So they don't, I don't need to talk a lot about them because to me it's obvious.
Yeah.
And they're educated. You can't compare their degrees in biomechanical engineering and just physics in general, and then
Yeah.
not even, how does that not create reasonable doubt? Like,
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
gonna
Listen,
believe Trooper Paul's accident reconstruction theory over
sure.
just data? Like, they didn't even
It's
reconstruct the accident. They just gave
it's
factual abilities of the happenings. Like, they weren't asked to reconstruct because they weren't given all the information. And a lot of people take the fact that they weren't
so
given all the information to their demise, but that's the point.
so I went to a hearing and I was outside the hearing on one side back in August. And so all the pink shirts, which is the Free Karen Reed side, was on one side, hundreds of them. And there was maybe 100 on the blue side. I was on the blue side. I don't usually go to these things, but I went to this one. And they keep it's like a Mason-Dixon line in between, in front of the stairs, that the state troopers keep that clean. And so all the pink shirts are on one side and all the blue. Well, I crossed over to talk to them on the other side. And all of a sudden, 2 of the channels went live and they were filming me. And everybody was throwing questions at me. And their question was on the ARCA issue. And he says, Kevin, do you believe the earth is flat? And do you believe in physics? So,
well, there's
they're
assholes
all-
on both sides, clearly. But
yeah, no, but
I mean,
their point was, so let me give you my answer to the question, though. So they were all shouting questions about the ARCA guys. And what I said was this: I said, listen up, guys. I think those ARCA guys, those scientists, are the best of the best. They're extremely qualified. I don't question their qualifications. And you could see they were listening. They were like, wow, I can't believe you just said that. I said, the problem is not their competence. The problem is their credibility. They weren't after the truth here. And the evidence for that is the fact that they did not, these guys on their website, I found in 2021, they had published an article that they are experts on Toyota tech screen data. And it says right on there, we can find evidence that regular black box data can't find. These guys knew that it was a Lexus, a Toyota Lexus. They knew that. And when they got their information from the feds, they didn't say, oh, by the way, we need there should be Toyota tech stream data.
how do you know that? Because I've never heard that before.
Because it was in the trial.
What, in this trial? That they
yes,
had,
it was.
But no, maybe they know the tech stream information, but when was it said that they were actually given it for this case? I thought
they were not. They were not given it. But that's
then who cares?
Listen, this is why doing an autopsy, asking a medical examiner to do an autopsy and not giving him the body. All right. It's the most important evidence is the vehicle data. Here they are designing cannons to fire cocktail glasses. Well, it's very useful to know the speed of the vehicle, but they didn't have any interest in that. So there's something shady that went on here. And we should save this for another show, Dana, but there's something really that stinks to high hell here in terms of the federal investigation. And I have a lot of evidence of it for you, but we'll save it for another time.
Okay.
But there's something that really stinks on it. It's not just state troopers that can be corrupt. Feds can be corrupt too.
Oh, I agree.
And so you have to look at the evidence and decide which is which,
And this is why this conversation is fun. We have lots of things we haven't even talked about. But when you come back to this is a real person being charged with second-degree murder, would you honestly convict beyond a reasonable doubt? Like, it's just a fair question.
Yeah.
Putting aside what you mentioned earlier, your biases, what would you say 2 years from now? All of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, during this trial, with the information that we have, there's no way I could convict her beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think a car hit her, so I'm on a different side. But beyond a reasonable doubt, even if you think the car hit her, and we talk about all the other things, the destroyed cell phones, the butt dials, all of the other things that we didn't even discuss, I don't know how you get there.
Because for me, there was
behind bars for the rest of their life.
Like, I don't give anybody the benefit of the doubt, right? So when I'm looking at something, I don't know the people involved. So I don't know if the troopers or the Canton cops or somebody had some incentive to want to plant evidence, right? You have to look at means and motive. Now, motive is hard, though, because there might be a motive that we don't know about. But we know that you need a hell of a lot of motive in order to be willing to risk the welfare of your life, your freedom, your career, in order to plant evidence. It's not like you just look any other way on something. You have to actively get involved in a murder cover-up, in a
I just
cover-up of a
think
murder.
I just think
So
they
there
think
was
they will.
so there would have to be a hell of a motive there for that. There isn't, and that we know of. And but more importantly, as I've demonstrated, there really was no means to it. And then when you start looking at the other things, there was no way to fudge that GPS data, and the defense didn't challenge it. The only thing the defense tried to challenge was they tried to suggest that maybe the clock was off on that GPS. And we can prove that that's wrong anyways, because you can look at the GPS data and match it to the surveillance video on the Brene Birth Temple when that drove by, and it matches up closely. So the GPS data, and they never challenged the location aspect of the GPS data. And the location shows that there was no way John went inside the house. There was no way. So that leaves you with having to say, all right, did he drop the phone and then go in the house and then somehow end up on top of his phone? But when you play this stuff out, especially when you factor in that Karen has said in interviews that she dropped John off at the foot of the driveway and watched him walk up to the house, and seemingly even has said something to the effect of start to walk into the house. So how did the phone end up on the far edge of the property? So she's not telling the truth. And now that hasn't been part of the trial. That might be part of the trial because they have tried to get that news footage and they might be able to get it in for the second trial. But that was not part of the first trial. But it is something we can factor in because we can see that video.
Well, you brought up the drinking glass. Like, I didn't even talk about this, but so the area of taillight that was found was pretty large, yes?
Yeah, it was a debris field, right? So
if he got hit and the taillight glass or plastic shattered very widely, you're talking 30, 40 feet by 20 feet. Like, we're not talking a small, confined, specific area by the curb.
Yeah.
Just like another question, how does the glass that he was holding in his hand not disperse in a relatively similar manner? It should scatter with the same force and impact that the taillight did and go backwards with his impact. And
the
that
answer is physics. The answer is physics, Dana. If you have an object in your hand, say your cell phone, and something at high speed hits you and sends you with a force in a particular direction, so you have that angular momentum going in that direction. That phone in your hand, let's say halfway there, it comes out of your hand, you let it go. But that phone has the exact same angular momentum that your body did because you were holding it when you were knocked. So when you let it go, it's going to go with you, and it's going to end up landing right next to you. So that's why the cocktail glass, it was in his hand, and when he was knocked, that glass was going to. It doesn't matter if he held onto it to the bitter end, or if it came out of his hand a half a second into it, it was going to end up with him. That's just physics.
But the shoe stays. The shoe stays, I get.
Because she got knocked out of the shoe.
It's a lot to swallow. The drinking glass is next to him. The phone is under him. The taillight is literally everywhere.
Because that's an explosive shattering. That's not part of his body. So it's going to shatter around it in a debris field. And that's why it ends up the way it does.
And then no taillight found at all. 7 inches, 6 inches. The gigantic piece is found at 7 a.m.
It's buried in the snow. They went around his body. They were in the debris field.
It wasn't that deep though. Like it was.
Even if it was, first of all, when they were looking, yes, it was at least 6 inches deep at that time. That storm was really coming down. There was probably 2 inches when Karen left her house at 5:08. There was probably 4 inches when they found John, and 6 inches when they were looking, at least. And when you have a flat object, even 1 or 2 inches would easily bury that object. Easily.
It's a lot when you stack.
It's not as much as you think. It's not as much as you think. It's just if you look through carefully and find that
it's plenty of reasonable doubt.
Stick with it. You're a very smart woman, Dana. And if you just really see the answers for this has been the problem with this whole thing, is that pretty much every other channel is trying to play to the conspiracy crowd, and they don't give you the information. And they're all one-sided. They're not really looking for the answers. I know you are. But so I'm not, listen, I'm not the greatest channel in the world, but unfortunately, that's kind of all you got. No one else is really looking. You don't think the glare is actually looking for the truth, is he? That's why he didn't want to debate me. They won't report things that come out. When it came out in that September of 2023 that the GPS showed he didn't go in the house, they didn't even report it. You think the glare told his audience that? No. When they found tiny pieces of taillight in John's clothing, that came out in that same report. You think they told their audience? No, they don't. They're not interested in the truth. Conspiracy sells. Conspiracy theory is what people want to hear. And they're just trying to make as much money off this as they can.
Conspiracy does sell, but I just don't know if this one is it. Like, it's funny. I was thinking about how I learned about this case and I said surviving the survivor. There's another case just, I don't know, a month or two ago that I learned about, which started with injuries, surviving the survivor. Ellen Greenberg. I don't know if any of you know about Ellen Greenberg.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it starts with the injuries. It really, to me, her case, there's no way. I mean, that I take a mental, like a really I don't know, just common sense approach that those injuries are not suicide. This injury isn't from a car. And then once you start to learn more, you can go down the conspiracy road, but you can also, I mean, with the FBI investigation, there's so many messages. Like, I don't know. There's just so much of this case that we haven't even talked about that just goes to possible innocence, but reasonable doubt without a question. But anyways, the whole Ellen Greenberg thing is exactly like that was my thought process too. When I learned about her case, I'm like, they called that suicide, and she's taken 12 years or however long that's been since that case to even get this attention. Like, it's just sad. Like it's just crazy. Like, I don't know. That has nothing to do with this conversation, but I don't know why that circled back into my mind. But
no, go ahead. I don't know. I know a little bit about that case. I'm not going to really comment on it because people get mad at me. So on that one. So
I mean, there's not much to learn besides the I mean, it's not really conspiracy, but it's just clearly not a suicide. And
I don't. Yeah,
it's clearly not a suicide. And it's like this investigation and Karen Reed was so horrible, in my opinion, that we may never get the answers. They didn't interview. They didn't get proper phone extractions from the right people. So we're not going to get the answers that we need for Karen Reed. You know what? That's just what's going to happen. And unfortunately, this Ellen Greenberg situation is.
What do you mean about not the proper phone extractions? I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm still like, when Buchanan and Higgins destroyed their phones the day before a preservation order.
Yeah, you mean Brian Albert and Brian Higgins.
Albert and Higgins. Yeah. It's ridiculous. I mean, it creates so much question.
Does it?
Why did you take screenshots and just send the screenshots? Why don't I? If I had his and and then I had another idea. If we had his location data, we would know more. Proctor actually was just forced to give over his work phone, just within the last 2 weeks or something like that. And I'm curious to know, maybe he was not smart enough, dumb enough, however you want to phrase it, to not bring his personal cell phone to 34 Fairview, but maybe you could place him at the scene of some of this stuff with his work phone. Let me ask
you, Dana, can I ask you a question?
What?
Can you think of any other possible reasons why men like Brian Higgins or Brian Albert might not want their phones to be public?
Well, sure.
Messages on their phones.
Of course. I mean, nobody wants their phone to be public. I mean, that's an easy question.
I mean, there might be something embarrassing on their phone, or even something that could be misconstrued in a way that would make it look suspicious or embarrassing. I mean, that's been the history of this case too, right? Jen McCabe voluntarily gave over her phone, and that turned out to be a huge mistake. Now they're accusing her and her daughter, because of information they took off Jen's phone, of being part of a murder conspiracy.
Don't delete
you call me, they didn't delete anything.
They deleted a lot of stuff.
No, you didn't watch the trial. That was
she deleted all kinds of calls, and
she didn't delete anything. Those were things done inside your phone that were not, as the experts testified, that were not done by the user. Those are folders
no,
copying themselves.
you're talking about the search. I'm not talking about the search. I'm talking about calls.
There's no calls were deleted. Nothing was deleted in that phone. Nothing. It was that's you.
I rewatched some of that, and
They explained it that the experts, the independent experts that you like, explained that those are not human deletions made by the user. That's
no, there were cell phone calls in her like Verizon or carrier records that weren't in her cell phone that showed she was deleting stuff.
You're gonna have to show me that. I didn't find any of that, and you have to understand a little bit instinctively, just common sense wise, Dana, that it's the job of defense teams, defense lawyers, and especially in a case like this where they're leaking everything out in this public relations campaign, to make things look like they're not. Okay. So for instance, one of the things that they kept doing was making it seem like, for instance, that when Jen called inside the house, that the call was answered, when in fact it wasn't. And this came out in the trial, and they didn't want to have to bring in an expert to explain it, but that it would show as answered on one end on one bill and not answered on the other bill. Because the explanation is when it goes to voicemail, even for a second, it's going to show as answered on one end. But they were not actually answered calls. And the defense knows this. The defense knew that Allie McCabe's Life 360 did not have her making all those 18-mile trips in a 10-minute period. She went home, but her cell phone was reaching out to the nearest cell tower because it wasn't getting the Wi-Fi signal for some reason, and it was connecting to the cell tower on the high school. Look at Yanetti's face when he's asking that questions. He knows it. He feels a little guilty doing it, but for his client, he's going to try to destroy this girl, and by her whole life now lives under this dark cloud of being accused of being part of a conspiracy, all to get a guilty person off. This is why I feel the way I do about this case. If it was just a matter of Karen going to jail, okay, I don't really care if Karen goes to jail. But there are now many innocent people that are being smeared and destroyed because of this false conspiracy theory that's illogical and disproved at every step of the way.
Well, I think most or a lot of social media disagrees with you. I kind of,
well, of course,
I don't believe in every single thing that's being talked about. I'm not saying that that's the person that I am. Mm-hmm. I'm more on I'm not going to tell you exactly what I think happened, and this is why. I mean, that's just dumb. That's naive, and I don't know. I can't speak to all the details. The investigation was horrible. I don't trust the testimony of a lot of the state, like the McCabe's, the Higgins. I don't like their testimony. Doesn't mean I think they do. I don't think he got hit by a car. That's it. Whatever else happened, I'm not here to like talk about that. I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I mean, that's where people start to get out their talons. I'm just saying, I don't think he was hit by a car. And if he wasn't hit by a car, then what are you left with?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think you're very smart. I like your approach. All I would say is, I think if you had been asking questions to a lot of these things and thinking about it as long as I had, I do think you would probably be very much in a similar position as I am right now. You haven't had a chance to absorb a lot of these explanations yet, and some of them we didn't have time to get into, but they are there, and so I do think you would process these over time. You just haven't been exposed to them yet, and if you keep asking these questions, I think you'll get to the truth. And you alone had the guts, or very rarely on the other side, to reach out and get information from the other side. This is why most of these people in social media do believe there's a conspiracy. They only get information from their bias, from their not even just bias, but one-sided sources that that really don't care about the truth. And so they're not asking these questions. They don't have these answers. I mean, I was on a show a month ago with Nurse Kim and David Cullinane, and he still asked me, His main question was, why would they bring the vehicle to the Sally Port? But that was answered in the trial. But people on the other side don't know the answers to these things for some reason because they're so in their echo chambers. And it sounds like you follow politics. That's a problem with people in the world of politics too. When they get into echo chambers, they may not know the full explanation from the other side. So it's all one side or the other, and the world becomes very black and white.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense, Dana?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. I mean, once you get, it's hard to cross back over once you've made up your mind. It really is. And that's why I have very specific questions, especially about the tech and the cell phone activity and all of the things that I think would click with me weren't answered. And the injuries weren't answered. I don't believe your personal opinion about the barometric pressure of the car to inaccurately reflect Apple Health data. I believe Apple Health data is accurate.
It's nowhere near as accurate as GPS, and that GPS shows.
Yeah, but you're talking
else.
To me, those two.
It's interpretive. It's interpreting your actions. GPS is highly accurate. It's designed by the military to fly a missile through a mullah's window from 500 miles away.
Correct. But
a health app is designed to help you exercise. It's nowhere near the same level of accuracy.
It's still relatively accurate, and you're not talking about it being inaccurate by, like a couple of steps or half the distance or one flight of stairs versus three flights of stairs. You have to dismiss it all in its entirety, and I can't do that.
It's one of them is wrong, and you are forced here to say which of those pieces of evidence is better.
You know what?
And it's not, and it's not hard to find an explanation for why a health app could be confused between someone driving in a car slowly and where the elevation is changing, whereas it's impossible to find any explanation for how the GPS could be wrong. It's impossible. You won't find one. You can search it. You won't find it.
Well,
it doesn't exist.
And
it wasn't challenged by the defense.
It wasn't, but I don't understand. I don't know. I don't think a normal person is going to get away from completely disbelieving the Apple Health data. And I know you mentioned this earlier, but even in my own little research I did, if you took the monotonic clock time for the Waze app and you subtracted the times, the defense theory would be perfect. So
no, it would not. Okay, let's take that on. Let's take that on.
It's pretty dang accurate, actually.
Let's take that on. Let's say hypothetically that the clock was off by 3 minutes. Okay. And so at the time when the state says Karen and John were driving because that clock was off 3 minutes, then hypothetically, as a matter of fact, they were at the location. They were at 34 Fairview, right? Because that's what you're saying here. Now
they would have arrived at what, 12:21 versus 12:24?
Yeah, so let's just grant that hypothetically for the moment, okay? It doesn't change the fact that that John didn't go in the house. All it does is it puts him there 3 minutes earlier. But the GPS shows he never went inside the house. So there's no way really around that. But then we can go back and also look at the clock issue to prove that that's wrong too, because you can look at what they were on Dedham Street, particularly at 138 Dedham Street, and what time they were there, and you can which was at 2019. And that correlates perfectly with the speed they were driving from a 0.7 miles away when they went by the temple, and that temple's clock records them, and we have the time.
Yeah,
so the clocks were not off 3 minutes.
You're trying to match a separate entity's timestamp on their security surveillance with, you got to stick with the cell phone, which has consistent times. We're talking minutes matter. I don't know if that security camera, but I know.
I don't know either. But now you have two clocks that are synchronized at the time. But like I said, even if the clocks were off 3 minutes, it doesn't change the fact that the GPS shows indisputably John didn't go in the house, and the defense didn't challenge that. The defense did not challenge that. So at most, you can possibly argue that Karen and John were sitting outside there at 12:21 or 12:22, but he didn't go in the house. So
Defense didn't challenge it. I don't know why. Maybe they can. Maybe they
because
will.
it can't be. It's GPS points. It would be foolish to challenge that.
It's
You know
GPS
exactly.
with the rate of error.
You
With the rate of
always know
error,
which was identified. You know what the
we're
strength
not
of signal
talking
is.
a mile. We're talking like within 100 feet. I'm not saying that
You
GPS is
always
wrong.
know the margin of error based on the strength of signal from second to second. And Trooper Carino identified there was a 6-second period in which the signal weakened enough that the margin of error expanded. Of that 6 seconds, only 4 of it was the margin of error include the house. And actually the 4th second, just barely, it reaches the door at 72 feet away. So really it's only 3 seconds. And only in that 3-second period that even could John have potentially been inside that house. However, in addition, there's no plot points that show him walking up the street or walking in the driveway or walking across the lawn. All you do is get this 3-second weakening of signal. But the idea that John flew across the lawn into the house, got attacked by a dog, got beat up, and then flew back and ended up in the same spot on the lawn as the last GPS point is kind of crazy. It's just not. It's not possible. And that's why the defense.
You're asking me to throw away all of the Apple Health data for
100%.
GPS, and I can't do that. I can't have one without the other. I would get rid of both of them.
One is good data and indisputable, and the defense didn't dispute it.
The data from Apple Health, and I'm talking steps and generalities, not to the 80 steps. It could be 60 steps. It could be 70 steps, but it's not.
Or driving slow in a car.
I can't get there. I don't think that was proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think that you can put this lady in jail for the rest of her life because
it was proven.
You're always gonna. If two conflicting things are at conflict, I will dismiss them both.
Not when one cannot be dismissed. They're not equal. They're not equal things here.
Well, I cannot let it go. There's just no way.
Maybe you just don't want to. Maybe you just don't want to. Is that possible, Dana? I'm sorry. I shouldn't say it that way. But I mean,
once you kind of look at how many cases have you watched where steps and stuff mattered in their cases?
Listen, the Apple is actually very accurate when it's calculating. And I've done a lot of research on this. When you are actually walking, it has a high degree of accuracy. But it can be fooled in certain circumstances, like when you're driving. Or if you're doing something it doesn't recognize, like you're climbing up on a ladder onto your roof to do the shingles. I mean, if you're skiing, there's all kinds of things that it can be tricked. But it is accurate for what it's designed to do. And it's designed as a health app to show you how far you walked, how far you jogged. It's very good at that. And so in certain circumstances, it can be very valuable as evidence in a case. But when it's trumped by better evidence that can't be disputed. For instance, if you had video of Karen striking John, you would have to dismiss that health app data, wouldn't you?
But that's irrelevant.
But you take the better evidence. You take the better evidence. You don't ignore. You don't say, I got 2 pieces of evidence here. One of them is health app that says he's going up and down stairs, and the other one is I got videos showing Karen strike John. Well, it's a wash. I got 2. No, you go with the better evidence. Yeah, and in this case here, the GPS is much better evidence. The defense didn't challenge it.
The problem with this case is that it is I don't know how you would get a better example of burden shifting. This is a case that is, the burden is now been put on the defense. The Commonwealth didn't even present their case in a linear manner to show what happened.
Agreed.
So
they did a bad job.
The burden is on the defense. You have all these explanations, but the thing is the defense doesn't have a burden. The burden of proof lies entirely on the Commonwealth, and we're left with all of these questions. I have a list of questions.
But it's the defense that's putting out a very wild conspiracy theory.
It's their defense.
So,
but
I think this was the problem that the prosecution made is they spent 7 weeks or whatever trying to disprove that conspiracy theory before ever giving the jury their evidence that shows what they say happened, and that was a tremendous mistake.
I mean, and
And they,
the medical examiners for both parties, they couldn't say that this was definitively from a. I mean, they both basically admitted this is not consistent with a vehicle, pedestrian accident. I mean, the entire burden is on the Commonwealth, and they just didn't prove their case. And no juror should have to walk away from a trial, especially a second-degree murder trial, where she could be facing life in prison with any questions about what happened. They
a
just
medical examiner is never going to it's going to be common that the medical examiner, that testimony by itself is not going to be able to prove to you what happened to somebody. Okay, so if, like, for instance, somebody whacked me on the head with a brick and it killed me, the medical examiner is just going to say, well, something struck him in the head and we don't know what that is. So that's all you have here is the medical examiner saying, well, we're not really 100% sure exactly how this happened, but we can tell you that he wasn't in a fight and there really was no evidence of a fight. So you're eliminating that possibility.
But they have, you have both the defense and the Commonwealth's medical examiners saying it is inconsistent with a motor vehicle pedestrian collision. You have
that's not quite what the medical examiner said for the state. She wasn't very good, but that's not what she said. She said it's not typical because in a typical hit and run, it's usually the front of the car strikes somebody, and so you have injuries to the legs. And in this case here, you don't have that, and you had limited injuries because he was knocked, and the primary injury was on the back of his head, which was not caused by the vehicle. So
if you're walking away with questions and you can't, and they didn't prove to you how that happened and how he got hit in the back of the head, and you're assuming what happened to his arm, that doesn't do it for me. That's not good enough. It just isn't.
Well, I mean, I agree. You have to have a better explanation, but you're not going to. But I think what the mistake you're making is if one particular piece of testimony does not say he was struck by a vehicle, then you call that doubt. But what you have to do, whether you're looking for the defense case or the prosecution case, is really look at more of a totality of the evidence. And
well, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And I've got a list of 20 to 30 things that give me pause, and that they didn't.
But I've already explained most of them, and the other ones we just didn't have time to get to.
In your ways, the Commonwealth did not. That's the problem.
Some of them they did, though. Some of them they did, but some of them it's difficult in a trial case because you can't. Adam Lally or the prosecutor can't just stand up and talk to the jury like I am to you. He has to present it through questions to witnesses, and that's a lot more challenging.
That's the way it goes. He's got to prove it. He didn't prove it. I don't think they can prove it.
Yeah, well, I think they're going to prove it. But they do have to do a better job to convince those 12 jurors. They have to do a better job.
This case is bloomed from just the case to all the post mistrial stuff, which I don't even know what your thoughts are about dismissing 1 and 3. That's a whole different can of problems. Yeah. But
what do you think?
I mean, of course I'm going to say they should, because she didn't mean to do this. And I don't even think whatever happened in the house, I don't think they meant to do that. I just think it was whatever happened wasn't intentional. I don't think anybody.
Well, we don't know, right? We don't know.
So you can't we don't. Second degree. That just blows my mind from the get-go.
Yeah.
And yeah. I personally don't think he was hit by a car, so you can't get me anywhere else besides a not guilty. I just can't. I don't think he was hit by a car. And then because of that, I'll listen to all the defense theories and I can give you my opinions on all of their topics. And there are so many things that are, controversial and strange and just bonkers. But that's the Commonwealth's job, is to prove it. I don't think that they with Proctor and all of we didn't even talk about Proctor and Proctor's problems. I mean, this case should have been dismissed from the get-go. I don't know why they didn't dismiss it.
Here's something fun I can do for you, Dana. So give me 1 or 2 things that you think the defense could do better to maybe even get to the point where you might get an acquittal. And if you can think of it, 1 or 2 things that you think the prosecution might do better that maybe might actually get a conviction?
Accident reconstruction, but I don't think you're going to be able to get there with. I don't think any professional is going to put their name out there and put their stamp of approval in this case. I think it would be, you know,
What if someone
suicide.
does? Would that make a difference to you if the state brings in a qualified accident reconstructionist that not only tells you that that's their opinion, but because I don't think that's important. I think it's more important that they explain how it happened.
Well, they could, but here's the problem. We don't have any information on how a physicist, somebody in physics would explain it. We don't know where his body was. We don't know where
We know
any
where
of.
we know what they know where the body was to
No,
within
they
like
don't. Not within not within a scientific certainty. They pointed at
within
the
a
ground and said there. They don't
no
know
no
where it
no.
was. There
That's
was no measurements done. There was no pictures. Nobody knows. Everybody who even testified said that the person who even told Proctor or Trooper Paul was somebody who told him this is where the body was. Nobody that was actually there
yeah,
that
but they
morning.
also looked at pictures and they can look at the GPS point of
But the
where John's
pictures that
phone
we
was.
saw,
Yeah, but they can also look at the GPS point
they
of
didn't even say
where
that they did that in the trial. Why didn't they say that they did that in the trial?
because there was no question about it, but they said they looked at descriptions of a witness testimony and then at pictures to develop an accuracy. I think they said to within 1.5 feet. I think that's what
I
Trooper
don't
Paul said.
think any person would be able to, literally be able to give you an accurate like analysis if they don't have solid data. You have to have solid data. How far, where was he, and where were all the pieces of the taillight? One was way over by the um uh
But those were all documented. I mean, unless you don't believe that that was on the level, but they were all each time they
Super
found a
Paul
piece.
didn't even know the one that was all the way by the fire hydrant. He didn't even know that it existed. He didn't even use that piece of taillight that was the furthest from anything to calculate his calculations. So, if we don't know,
No, I don't think that's what he said. I think he
it
said
is
that that's
exactly what he
that.
said.
Well,
I
I don't
listened to
remember,
him.
but why you? I don't really get it. Every little
You
tiny
can't
piece.
you
I don't
can't
get it, Dana.
you can't
I don't
solve
get
an
it.
equation
You have a
without 2
you're
of the 3 parts.
finding you're going to find one piece out of a debris field that's an outlier and say that and that could have been moved there, shoveled there, plowed there, or whatever, and you're going to say that's a base. I mean, you're looking at a debris field, and there are always going to be outlier pieces, something that bounced off something or whatever, and from that you're making a determination as he did, and he said it's within 5 feet of where he believes the impact radius was. But I think you're kind of plucking out little isolated things here that
Because when
aren't really.
you have to be so specific with all of your data points and measurements, and this is where the glass was, and they didn't take a maybe they had one picture of what the glass looked like, and then like where were they don't have any of that. If I had an accident reconstructionist that had all of like actual real data, not estimates, that would help. But we don't have that because they didn't do it. They didn't take measurements for stuff to like do calculations. They're
I don't know.
assuming.
I don't really understand what you're saying, but I don't want to keep it gets to be beating a dead horse.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
you
I
know,
agree.
a body is a 6 foot. He's 6'2". It's not like there's a point. It's not like somebody did a chalk line of it. What you need is to get it as accurate as you can, and they determine that to within a foot and a half. I don't.
Yeah, but
I
there's
don't. I
reports
didn't
that
see anybody on the defense quibbling about things that nobody on the defense did. So
well, it's
it
because it's
gets.
hindsight 2020. I mean, because ARCA is huge, and they were the only people that were asked to do real calculations, and they just didn't have the data
And
to do it.
they built a cocktail glass gun cannon. So
Yeah,
I mean,
because guess
I
what?
don't know.
They don't think a human arm could break a taillight. So they tried to
That's
figure
not
out
what they said.
what could break a taillight.
In fact, what they said was at 15 miles an hour is when you begin to see significant damage to a vehicle.
I'd have to re-listen to the testimony. I know they said
Yeah.
something about, but they also said at 15 miles an hour is when you would see, I think that statement was you would see damage to to the person, not the vehicle.
Yes, and that's the issue, is to explain
Because
the
if it was at 24 miles an hour, that's why it doesn't explain why there are no broken bones. Because at 15 miles an hour,
we don't know there was no broken bones.
yes, we do.
Nope, they did not X-ray the body. They
Yes,
don't
they
X-ray
did.
bodies. They did not. They don't
I-
X-ray bodies in the United
I
States.
will be the first to admit there were no broken bones. That was said. That was a very
Nope.
big contention.
There were actually there were broken ribs, but those were
That
attributed
was
to
from
CPR.
Yeah.
But the way they knew about that was when they do the autopsy and they cut them open, and they could see that. But there was no X-ray. And so again, I learned about the cases too. I don't know, but it turns out that in the United States they don't typically do an X-ray as part
I'll
of an
challenge
autopsy.
you on that there are no broken bones.
Go ahead. Sure. There was there was no. Whoa. I didn't say there were no broken bones. I said there was no X-ray.
What? Okay, same.
No, it's not the same thing at all, because the only way you'll find a broken bone if you're looking at the arm is if it's a compound fracture, so it's visible to the touch. And that's so if there were fissures in his elbow or in his arm, there would be no way of knowing unless you did an X-ray.
I'll have to research that. Every single thing I've read said there's no broken bones except for the chest, which I was aware of.
No,
Which is
that's
from
true.
CPR.
No broken bones were discovered, but they didn't do an X-ray.
I've never heard that before.
No, I know. I'm not surprised. I mean, it's a lot of questions that come up in this case. It's endless. You can discuss it.
I know,
for
but I've
days, right?
proved you wrong on some points too. So I mean,
Yeah.
fair. We've got to be able to.
Yeah. No, I'm not faulting you for not knowing that. I'm not. Please don't take it that way. I mean,
Why didn't they bring it up in court? They X-rayed him, and I mean, I don't understand.
Because they didn't X-ray him, and it's too late now. So, and they don't typically do X-rays in the United States. So there was nothing unusual about it, and they didn't have at the time a reason to do it. They weren't anticipating this conspiracy theory. So, it's just not what they did, and it's just not what they do in any case in the United States. I wish they did, because I bet that they would find fissures in that elbow, fractures, but they weren't the type, that it wasn't the kind of thing you could tell by physically examining the body.
Yeah, I will have to go and look up that. I would challenge you on that one.
No, I'm 100% sure about that. But I understand where you're taking it, because the medical examiner would have said no broken bones were found or something to that effect. And that's true, but they didn't X-ray it.
Show me how you know they did an X-ray, and that's what I'd like to see.
All right. I mean, they just don't. You can Google this. They don't X-ray in the United States, as part of autopsies. They just don't.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll have to revisit that one. I don't believe that.
Let me try. I don't know. Do you use Bing at all, the search engine?
No.
There's a great research tool on here. It's connected to ChatGPT. It's called Copilot, and it's great even for stuff that you already know but you forgot. Obviously, anything with ChatGPT or any search, AI, you have to be a little careful. But let's see. Let me just ask: do they X-ray bodies in autopsies?
I would think that would be case by case. I don't think you can blanket statement that either.
Yeah, so we'll see what they say. You might be right. Maybe they say sometimes. Let's see what they say here.
Well, I've enjoyed this. I really have. I haven't ignored all of your comments. I didn't even open that tab, and you didn't pull anything up. So
I didn't pay attention to them either. So yeah, I was trying to focus on talking to you. So.
Yeah, I can't manage the comments and keep my mind in a conversation.
Yeah. It can be hard. It can be hard, Dana. Well, like I said, I think you're very smart, and I appreciate you coming on. And it was a good discussion. We get a little, we can fight a little, like friendly, and it was fun. So, like a bar fight.
I agree. So, I like to fight. I like to argue. I just want to admit, and clearly we wouldn't be fit to be jurors. We know too much, but I don't think.
Right.
I just don't think it's fair to say she's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's all. It's
okay. Well, you're welcome to come back on and keep an open mind and keep asking these questions. And in any case, keep doing what you naturally do. Try to get both sides. And certainly, maybe we'll see how things. Maybe we'll have you on during the trial to see if anything's changed. Like especially after we have the accident reconstruction, and then you can see if you thought it improved at all. And maybe you still won't be convinced.
Got to
You
improve.
know, so
I mean,
yeah.
Trooper Paul is horrible. It's got to improve. But again, it goes back to data. It's garbage in, garbage out. They didn't do what you wanted them to do because they couldn't. You have to have specific data points to do that. That's why they did the reverse. What could do this? Could this do that to, what injuries would you see at what weight of mass and impact on, XYZ mass on an arm? So I just,
Well, I think they had enough evidence that they felt, they had her. Now, I never put weight on these, but they had her statements at the scene. They had some of her strange behavior, like at 5:00 calling Kerry Roberts and saying John's dead and then hanging up. There was a pattern of stuff like that. And then you had the hair of John's found on the vehicle, his DNA found in the taillight housing.
But it wasn't blood DNA. That was another thing on my list we didn't talk about. How do you get scratches like that and not have blood DNA on any of those pieces of taillight? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm not an expert on that, but again, the defense didn't bring anybody up to challenge that either. So
I think the
don't
defense
challenge it,
was
but
overconfident. Like,
I don't know why. I mean, but
I know why.
because
They should have done a lot of things. They should have called the tow truck driver. They could have. I would have had my own. I would have had an Apple Health data expert. I mean, there's so many things that it's all hindsight 2020. Again, like we can, battle on certain topics, and in a vacuum, you could convince me, but this case is not in a vacuum. There is just a ton of shitty stuff that happened in that investigation, and I just don't think that the other side is believable. They're not truthful.
I mean, 9 out of the jurors ended up thinking that she did the crime, and they were for manslaughter. So I don't know why the defense would have been overconfident towards an acquittal. They weren't even close to getting 12 people to acquit her on manslaughter. So I
don't like the jury instructions. I'm really curious about what the Supreme Court's going to say about the jury instructions. I think I'm a smart person. I follow cases from time to time.
Yeah.
I looked at that thing and I was like, what? Like the second it was confusing. And then when she said, however she phrased it, don't come unless you've reached a unanimous decision on all, like that's confusing. What's that language for? So I hope that at bare minimum, regardless of what they do about the counts, they need to clean up those jury instructions. Like
I agree. And it's not going to, I don't think it's going to impact the state Supreme Court is not going to rule in their favor on this because it's kind of standard stuff that's being used in this trial. But I don't think it's going to be easy to get a conviction on 1 and 3 anyways. I mean, 3 is the second degree, and it's going to be really difficult to prove intent here. There is the part of second degree in Massachusetts that is called reckless endangerment. So technically, the fact that she put the car in reverse when she could have known someone was in the area and went for a significant distance, punching the pedal 75%, that's reckless endangerment. So you could get convicted on that. But I think as a practical matter, you're probably not going to see a jury want to do that.
I agree. I mean,
so,
and then like something I was reading was like, well, if she left him at the scene and then that didn't make any sense to me. I don't even want to go down that like thought process.
Yeah. Right.
But either way, like
because you can't prove that she knew that he was injured and at the scene. That's the whole leaving the scene.
What I read was like she left him, and then no matter what happened, she shouldn't have left a drunk man on the side of the road. So whether she hit him or a plow hit him, she was the reason that he got killed, no matter who did it. Like that was the whole interpretation of manslaughter. On one angle that I was reading, I was like, that's just dumb. Either he got hit by the car or he didn't, and I'm moving on. I'm not going down these teeny tiny splitting hair rabbit holes about manslaughter when you're convicting a person for life. No, not doing that.
And if she's convicted of manslaughter, it's not life.
That's not. But how many years is it in Massachusetts?
Well, I mean, because it's OUI manslaughter. My understanding is it could be up to 15 years.
Okay, I don't know how much the manslaughter charge is for, but
Yeah.
either way.
I mean, a regular manslaughter charge would be a lot less than that, a lot less. But OUI manslaughter, I guess, and I'm not a lawyer, obviously, and but it could be up to 15 years.
And it'll be cool, like what happens with, I don't think any real big discovery or anything is going to happen with the civil cases, which proves the drunkenness, which would prove the
Right.
OUI, which would give the aggravating factor. I don't think any of that's going to get resolved anytime soon. So it'll be
Right.
interesting.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dana. I very much enjoyed meeting you, and we'll battle again sometime soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Dana.
All right. Good night.
Take care. Okay, guys, I owe some thank yous to people that supported us. Lavish Love says Levy flipped. I'm not sure what you mean, Lavish. I hope so. Do you know something I don't know? Let's see what the dude abide says. He usually says something clever. That's just like her opinion, man. Keep doing what you do, Kev. All right. I mean, let's be nice. People have strong feelings about the case, but I don't think that Dana's not part of the mob activity that goes on. Kitties 1993 from Chicago. During snowstorm, we are used to plows, lights moving up and down streets all night. You would not get up unless maybe sirens. Thanks, Kitties. I love Chicago. I have been to Chicago 3 times. Beautiful, beautiful city. And I've been there during a snowstorm too. Pretty cool. But in the city, now I lived in cities most of my life too. They do have sirens, but the thing is you get used to them after a while. I lived in a downtown area, and I don't remember if it took me a couple months, but initially it seems like there were sirens waking me up every morning, going to every accident and whatever. But eventually then you do get used to them, and sorry. Just had a little message there. Sorry about that. No, Lavish. I appreciate actually, Dana. I think it's important to battle people that have a different way of thinking or a different interpretation of the evidence. So I don't think that she was in any way disrespectful, and I thought it was fun to have her on. And we shouldn't expect someone who has looked at the evidence and has strong feelings from the other side to suddenly hear my arguments, even if they're as articulate as I hope they would be, which I'm sure they're not. But even if they were, you can't expect them to just flip overnight based on that, So I think everybody has to have their own process, and it's important to just keep asking questions. And if you keep doing that, I think most people that keep doing that eventually end up on the same side of this as us, because the evidence is pretty powerful. But I do think that she's right, that you have to explain these injuries to John in a convincing way to a jury, or you're not going to win. I've always said that. So we've been on a long time, guys. So let me just see what's going on. Looks like Lava is battling Tom Fleming. You don't want to battle Tom. Hopefully they're just kidding around. I haven't really been able to see chat until now. I really wanted to focus on the guest. She didn't really seem, I think she's from Tennessee, but she didn't really have a Southern accent. So we'll have to, maybe she moved there. A lot of people are moving to Nashville. I've never been there, but a lot of people, it's like an up and coming city that a lot of people seem to be moving to. Day after day. You know what? Says that she refused to see anything you said, but I don't think that's fair to say that yet, because the thing is I've had a lot of interactions with people going back over the last year and a half, and some of them battle me for months without budging. And then they budge. And then they're here. Some of them are here in chat tonight. And they're on this side of the aisle now. But everybody has to get there through their own process, asking their own questions and answering them in their own way to their own satisfaction. But it is important to get information from the other side. And this is one of the things in this case. So, like, Turtle Boy had his trivia night the other night, and he had told Phelps on his show how smart his audience is. And you can ask him any question, what are the names of the people that were in the house or allegedly in the house? And they'll give you the names, right? The problem is everything they have is 100% from the conspiracy 101 side of things. But if you ask them, don't need these now. If you ask them to answer something that was a mystery but has been debunked, such as why did they tow it to the Sally Port? None of them knows the answer to any of those kind of questions. And so that's the problem in anything in life, in being in an echo chamber. So, but Dana is reaching out to the other side. And where is she going to, if she doesn't reach out to me or watch my channel, where is she going to get that information? Unfortunately, there's just not a lot out there. I don't know if Matt Boundless Millennial is still doing shows, maybe. His shows seem to be more on the entertainment side. The ones I remember, they were extremely funny. So not really sure. But, if you are seeking information from the others, if you're on the Free Karen Read side, or if you're on the conspiracy side, and you're seeking information from the other side, just to be due diligence to make sure you're not missing important parts of the point, where are you going to go? You kind of really only can come here. Eventually, not that I'm the only one that knows. Most of the people in chat here are very informed in all this stuff too. But I'm the only one with a channel torturing myself by talking about it every night, right? So, anybody have any questions? Did anybody go through that whole thing? And Kara, wondering if you have any new work on pictures matching up the injuries to the position of John. If we could get some good close-ups of the structure inside that taillight, that would be really good. So Scorpio's talking about sending money to Karen. I mean, people got the right to do what they want with their money. And I don't know. Is this one of our old friends under a different name, but all kinds of music check. She says, have a coffee ice cream on me. We appreciate you. I do have some coffee ice cream, and I think I will have some before I go to bed. Thank you very much. All kinds of music check. So all kinds of music. It seems like nowadays, unless I'm missing something, there's only two kinds of music left, right? Doesn't seem like rock has died, which breaks my heart. But it seems like nowadays you have hip hop, or whatever they call it now, and country. Country is huge. So it would be very sad to think that classic rock is dead. That was always my favorite kind, is classic rock. But Andy says, Kevin, every time you challenged what she thought was a fact, she nitpicked and tried to find something to back herself up. Yeah, but that's okay. That's arguing. I like that. As long as she absorbs these things. Keep in mind, Andy, she did what the Glare wouldn't do. She had a discussion with me. She politely sought out information from the other side. And you got to respect that. And so in the heat of battle, she pushes back and stuff like that. That's okay. And I obviously got a little bit hot sometimes too. Sometimes interrupted her. Sometimes she interrupted me. That's okay. It's like a couple of friends sitting in a bar having an argument. You're going to have a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, you keep trying to walk it back and keep trying to listen to the other side. And I think she did for the most of that. But we've given her food for thought. And maybe she'll think about this. Maybe she won't change any of her opinions. But we've got these things spinning now in her mind. And as you go forward, as things go forward over time, hopefully she'll just keep asking these questions. And then when the trial comes up, she'll maybe look at that evidence that comes out in a different light. Hey, Blanco's here. What's up, dude? I never know if I'll be going back to the Canton Dedham area. It's 45 minutes for me. But if I know I get to go and have a beer with somebody like Blanco, it makes me a little more likely to want to go up there. So I'll have to try to get up there. Ken makes a really good point. And he says you can see how a juror can fall in the same trap when the state didn't address the things that we talked about tonight. And I think that is the same situation that's what Dana was in. And it's not unreasonable. Most of this stuff was not made clear to the jury. So that's a problem. Dude abides, where you live? Do you live anywhere near the area? I guess I thought because you were out in California, being the dude. But yeah, we can all get together for a beer. I mean, she came in, she did battle, and she's never been on a show before. She doesn't have her own channel. You got to give her credit for that. Now, I'm getting older, dude, so my mind isn't as quick as it used to be. But I've had a little bit of an advantage in that I was on court TV every night during the trial, right? So I've had to explain these things many times. This was her first chance to do it. So I thought she did good. And thank you, J5, for helping Tom out with the moderating very much. Is it JI5? I know your real name, but you don't want me to say it here. So, but thank you very much. Appreciate it. And looks like chat's going good. I didn't get to see a lot of it during the show, but hopefully everybody had a good, friendly back and forth in chat. Was anybody famous here in chat that I missed? Anybody interesting? That was very tiring, Lava, to have to do that every night and during the trial, because you do the trial all day. Some of those mornings I went on court TV in the morning too. Me and Tom did some recap shows too, so it was very tiring. It took a toll on me, I think. It really took a couple of weeks of hitting the gym hard and getting in the sun and trying to recover from that trial. That was a long ordeal. I'm not looking forward to the next one, but I am glad this is not a shot at the prosecutor, but to have a different voice out there, it'll make it potentially a little bit more different. You to have to go through it with the same. I don't know. They have to have a different strategy. A jury only has so much ability. Human beings only have so much ability to absorb information. You can't think that you're going to make them absorb information over 9 weeks and they're going to remember what happened in week 1. That's crazy. That was just a bad strategy. I don't know who thought that strategy up. I don't know. The grifter himself was here. All right. Lava assures us they will have a different strategy. I think you're right, Lava. I'm hearing that, but I don't know the prosecutor. I don't know, but hopefully, just focus on the evidence and cut off all the fat. Just go right to the meat and cut off all the fat, because you saw in the interview with the second juror interview that Turtle Boy did. They focused on just a few things. And think about the way a jury works. Think about any 12 people. If you put them in a room and you have a discussion about any topic, right? you're going to go around the room and say, what matters to you? What matters to you? What matters to you? If each person brings up 9 things, what's 12 times 9? Anybody know the math on that? Oh, you got like 100 things. I don't remember the exact number. So that'd be 120 minus, what is that, 109? I forget. Anyways, you're going to have, if you got 12 people in the room and each person wants to talk about 9 different things, that's 100 things to talk about and debate. That's crazy. You'll never get anything done that way. So each juror is going to focus on 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things. And that's just the way it's going to go. So they're not going to, for instance, the fact that Karen Reed didn't take her shoes off, that's just a waste. It doesn't really tell us anything. And yeah, I understood what he's trying to say, that Karen knew that John was never going to go in the house again, so she didn't take her shoes off. But you can't prove that. You don't know what was in Karen's head. And it's just a waste of time to bring it up because there's no way that a jury is going to factor that in. And there was a lot of other things like that where the jury was given information that just wasn't going to be in any way that they use. And I think at the end of the day, they really didn't use the I hit him stuff either because it's just not really proven. But you do have to include that in because it fits into kind of a cherry on the top with all the other evidence, especially when you look at the pattern of Karen at 4:45 suddenly screaming that John's dead, wakes up the niece, calls Jen McCabe, then calls Kerry Roberts, screams John's dead and hangs up. There was something going on there. And so I think it's important to develop that, and you have to finish up with that testimony of her saying, in the car, she's saying, could I have hit him? Could I have hit him? And at the scene, she's saying, I hit him. So it's important to get that in there, but don't rely on that evidence because that is not something that the jury weighed very heavily. The most important thing is accident reconstruction. You've got to convince them these are how John's injuries happened. This is how the damage to the car happened. You have to explain that. I'm not saying perfectly, but you have to explain it beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to explain it very convincingly. So Layla just asked, I think it was Layla asked a good question. Let me hit this. No, it was Scorpio, actually. Why didn't Karen just say she didn't do it and doesn't know who did it instead of throwing all these people under the bus? So I think this is a really good, questions like this are really, really good for us to consider. But I don't think that they obviously factor in with the prosecution strategy. You're not going to get a jury to ask those kind of questions, and nor should they. But for us in the public, yeah, for people that are out there, see, Dana was not saying that Karen is innocent. She's saying, I don't believe that the state has proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So, but for people that are out there who've put Karen up on a pedestal, they think she's really factually innocent. And so it's for those people that are out there dedicating so much of their life to this movement, you got to start asking these questions. Why did she not say at the time that she didn't do it? That John, why didn't she say, I saw John, I dropped John off and I watched him walk in the house? Did she not remember that till later? Till a year later? It's kind of weird. So there's a lot of questions like that that I think you really have to ask. Was it really J-Ray? Not that I know of. I did have her number, and it is a Tennessee, Georgia number. I've talked to her on the phone. So I don't think it's somebody local. But again, too, I also think that it's important for us here on this side in our group to treat somebody like that respectfully. And I'm hearing that for the most part, that's the way it was. Because ideally, you want to have this kind of mutual, you want to avoid echo chambers. And so somebody like, if I go on, at the very least, we can contrast ourselves with the way they behave. So the Glare is never going to have me on his show. He's terrified of that. But we know the reception. We know how it would have been in chat. We've seen it over the last more than a year. So we know how it is. If I had gone on the Glare show or any of the free Karen Reed channels, we know how it would be. No. You know, would Turtle Boy have me on his show? No. Yeah, I was on his show a long time ago. But would I go in that show? I have to say probably not. I would like to go on a show that was neutral and moderated and had Turtle Boy in there. But I don't want to, I won't go on his show because of what he's been doing with doxing people. Let's just show an example of this, of why this is an example of why I can't go on his show.
You ignore emails. You can't ignore us in person. You can't do it. Can't ignore us at your kids' soccer games either. I'm just saying. If you think we won't do that, you don't know how we operate. All right. You're ignoring this is unacceptable. Unacceptable. So let's do it. You know what I mean? Like, she needs to be our next person that is held accountable and has her feet put to the fire and says, what are you going to do about this, Andrea Campbell? You have corrals. You ignore.
So let's just replay this one more time. Andrea Campbell is the Attorney General in the state of Massachusetts. She's not involved in this case in any way. And I don't know what preceded. This is the clip I have. But what is he asking the Attorney General to interfere in his case or on the behalf of Karen Reed? I don't know. But he's saying, if you don't play ball, we're going to bring our mob to your kids' soccer games or sporting events or whatever. This is what we're dealing with here. This is why I would never go on his show. And I wouldn't recommend anybody in regular media give him the time of day or have him on either. I don't know what's going on here. If his mind is breaking down, he's wearing a tank top that says Prison Turtle. And in that same moment, he's challenging the Attorney General, threatening her children. Wow.
You ignore emails. You can't ignore us in person. You can't do it. Can't ignore us at your kids' soccer games either. I'm just saying. If you think we won't do that, you don't know how we operate. All right.
So here he is threatening her that he's going to bring a mob and saying, this is how we operate. And I'm going to bring that mob to your soccer games, your kids' soccer games, if you don't give us what we want. This is why I can't go on his channel. This is disgusting. And I mean, one of the things that bothers me about this case is the false equivalency that is always, both sides. No, there's nobody on this side that does that. All right. There's nobody on this side that is giving out people's personal information. I got contacted earlier. I'm not going to mention any of the details, but somebody who is, I got to be careful I say this, but who I'm friendly with, but who was on the other side, and someone who is a reasonable person, but doubts the state's case here. And someone I spoke with a long time ago, and occasionally since, but she got back to me and said that somebody has a social security number of one of the witnesses and is trying to use it to access their banking, and had admitted that. So this is what they do. There's nobody doing that on this side. People always try to say, what about Kate? What is Kate doing that is comparable to anything that goes on the other side? Is Kate doxing people's wives where they work? Turtle is. Is Kate threatening to go to kids' soccer games with a mob? Turtle is. I mean, it's just so much here. It's not like, but to think it's just Turtle being a little rough or a little controversial. No. Thousands of people. I have some other information that I can't, another very disturbing thing that I don't think there's any way I can go into it. Something else that recently happened. But it shows how dangerous this mob is. Yeah, I guess I can't. I'm trying to think if there's a way I can say it without, but I don't want to see the reason you can't go into these things is because you don't want to make the lives of these people that are victims of this mob any more miserable than that mob has already made it. But what these people do, it's disgusting. It's way beyond just having a different opinion or criticizing somebody. No, it's threats involving kids' games, consistent threats to dox people, threaten to give information, personal information from these people to Turtle Boy. So he will use it in that kind of way. And there are thousands of people in this state who participate in that kind of thing. Thousands. That's a witch hunt by definition. That's a witch hunt. That's a pogrom. It's just a modern version of it that instead of killing people, they try to destroy them in social media. But it's an irrational mob where in a witch hunt, you will see people that normally seem like reasonably decent people. And all of a sudden, they lose all sense of judgment and they succumb to a kind of hysteria and a group mob mentality. And they do things that they would not normally do. We're seeing that here. That a lot of the people that do this probably aren't necessarily, have never done things like this before, but they're swept up into this thing. And what they do is, it's more than just crossing the line, it's running over the line. And I don't know. All I've been trying to do for the last year is try to get other people to help me stand up to it. But people are afraid because the kids are in school or in college or this and that. And their wife has a business or has a job, and social media can do a lot of damage if you own a business. Let me give you the email, Samantha. Hold on one second. Yes, he did go to a soccer game. It was a lacrosse game, actually, where Jen's daughter was playing, and brought a cameraman there and harassed her in the stands. And he relies on the fact the camera person is there to protect him, really, because in a normal world, the woman's husband would knock his teeth out. But nowadays, Turtle knows that he's protected by a camera. So, but again, if this was just Turtle Boy doing this stuff in a vacuum, you'd say, oh, okay, whatever. Just like, that nut Steve Cody. Don't really talk about him much because what's the point of worrying about him? But the difference is Turtle Boy has a large following that is organized. You have people like the Pitbull and that creep show Haley, that's really a guy named Jason, out there for whatever reason, doing his bidding, putting out false information all the time, pretending to be whatever, victims advocates or this and that. But they're part of a highly organized mob that is using mob tactics. That was a long leak, Tom. I guess you can't do those leaks Cape Cod style. All right, guys. So it is ice cream time. Thank you very much. So I don't know when the next show is going to be, but I did the night that Phelps was on Turtle Boy, I reached out to him. I said, when you want to come on? Because we had already talked about him coming on, and he said, I'll come on in 2 weeks. So that would kind of lead to about this Saturday, but I have to talk to Phelps and see if that's actually what he wants. So maybe it'll be a week after that. So, but sometime soon we will be having Phelps on the show. He will be plugging his podcast that comes out on October 17th. J Ray is in California. Oh, wow. So we got someone here from Chicago, at least a couple from California. And as always, thank you for best moderator in the business, Thomas Fleming, and then also our new moderator, JI5. So the idea is to try to keep chat civil, constructive, like it was, like me and Dana tried to be tonight, I think. Ken Weeks is in Oregon. Wow. Layla says she's never seen anything like this. Yeah, it's a real thing. So, and I talked by email to Joel from Surviving the Survivor today and explained this needs to be addressed, what's going on in social media. And he seemed to agree and said, we'll talk by phone afterwards. That doesn't mean I have to go on his show. I don't care if I go on his show. But I think it would be helpful if they would address what's going on. So if they think I'm a lightning rod, I got plenty of stuff to do. But we can give them clips and maybe we can find somebody more acceptable to them. I don't know, but there's really nobody that's going to discuss the evidence in a constructive way that's going to be acceptable to the mob. But this wouldn't even really be about the Karen Reed case. It's actually what we want to discuss is the mob activity of trying to dox people and their family and try to control them with their family. This is just going to, if you don't start attacking this stuff, really preferably just by the public rejecting it. That's always been my preference, not to try to go after things legally. But at some point, because the public isn't really standing up, and for the most part they're not, then maybe you need to, just for the sake of some law and order, risk a little bit more aggression by the police. And I think that's what we're seeing. So, but they're very aware of not wanting to violate freedom of speech and that stuff too. So I don't know. But I mean, in an ideal world, none of that would even be made necessary if just enough people in the public found the balls to stand up and say no more. And if enough people just did it at the same time, they wouldn't be able to attack us all. You don't want just to leave it all on me to do it. I mean, it's there are people that can do a much better job, but it's also a lot for one person. So, all right, guys. Thank you again for being here. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.